Chapter 873. Little Grandmaster? Everyone was dumbfounded. Shen Xinghe looked at Yi Xian. Are you toying with the old man? Yi Xian shook his head. Sect leader Shen, someone wants to see you. Come in. After saying that, he turned around and walked into the hall. At this time, Chen Tian suddenly made a move. He grabbed at Yi Xian, and a powerful force swept towards Yi Xian. At the same time, the space around Yi Xian froze. However, at this time, an invisible force shook out from the hall. In an instant, the space around Yi Xian returned to normal. Not only that, the force released by Chen Tian also disappeared. Seeing this scene, Chen Tian's face became extremely solemn. There was another expert in this hall. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly looked at Chen Tian. Din Chen, come and hit me. Everyone. Chen Tian looked at Yi Xian, and his right hand slowly clenched. Suddenly, a blue talisman of the lowest grade flew out from the hall. In the blink of an eye, this talisman arrived in front of Chen Tian. Chen Tian's face changed, and he punched out with his right hand. Boom! Under the gazes of everyone, Chen Tian retreated explosively, and he retreated until he was outside the talisman sect. Everyone was petrified. By the time Chen Tian stopped, his whole arm had completely cracked. A blue talisman. Chen Tian looked in the direction of Fu Wenzong, and his expression was incomparably solemn. The opponent actually used a blue talisman to repel him. Who is it? In front of the ancestral hall, Shen Xinghe's expression also became solemn. After a moment of silence, he walked towards the ancestral hall. The others wanted to go in, but they were blocked by a mysterious power. After Shen Xinghe entered the hall, in addition to Yi Xian, there was another middle-aged man. When he saw this middle-aged man, Shen Xinghe was slightly stunned. In the next moment, he became excited and quickly bowed respectfully. Xinghe greets the patriarch. Fu Xiaotian glanced at Shen Xinghe and smiled. Heavenly Talisman Master? Shen Xinghe nodded hurriedly. Yes. Fu Xiaotian smiled and looked at Yi Xian. He's my new disciple. He had just accepted a disciple. Hearing this, Shen Xinghe's expression suddenly became a little strange. What should he be called when he was the disciple of his own ancestor? As Yi Xian had said, he really had to call him Little Grandmaster. Shen Xinghe looked at Fu Xiaotian. He hesitated for a moment and then said, Grandmaster, why is that? He still couldn't understand why Fu Xiaotian accepted Yi Xian as his disciple. Fu Xiaotian smiled and said, Is there something you're worried about? Shen Xinghe nodded. Yi Xian has a fifth-dimensional treasure. He is the archenemy of the Worldwide Academy. Moreover, he has a lot of karma. If our Fu Wenzong is related to him, I'm afraid. At this point he didn't continue speaking. Fu Xiaotian smiled and said, This is also an opportunity for Fu Wenzong, isn't it? Shen Xinghe said in a deep voice, I know. However, I don't want Fu Wenzong to be involved in this dispute. Fu Xiaotian nodded. As the sect leader, you should naturally consider this. However, some things can't be avoided. Now I have accepted him as my disciple. Are you going to accept him or not? Of course, if you don't, it doesn't matter. I will let him leave Fu Wenzong. Shen Xinghe smiled bitterly. Grandmaster, aren't you asking for my life? How can I, Fu Wenzong, refuse to accept Grandmaster's disciple? Green City Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestor, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as the crown prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a young man with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the elders of Yi clan. Why? At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look, and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to everyone in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian, is the crown prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. This is a matter of the clan. What are you interrupting for? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid, not daring to look at the great elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and entered the ancestral hall. Once again, she bowed to the elders. Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He's fighting for the clan, and we don't know if he's dead or alive. Yet, the clan is using groundless excuses to strip him of his position. This is unfair. Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men drag her away. At this time, the new crown prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning. The great elder replied coldly, then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince, Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered. Young Master Yi Lang inherits the crown prince's position. What are you yelling about? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she didn't cry. She just held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince. Yi Lang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the crown prince, I'll need 10 personal guards. From now on, you'll be my personal guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed, and hurriedly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the crown prince, even if it means death. Yi Lang nodded. Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Do not hold back. Understood. Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the killing intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this time, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something, and he suddenly stopped. Within the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, all the elders frowned. The great elder's eyes narrowed, and his face darkened. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang, and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger, leaping in front of him. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Bang! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop, and he rushed towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, Your man? As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me! Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu, and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Peng! Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides, there were the Yi clan elders. Why? At this time, A timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look, and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a hint of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she had rushed over despite her illness. The old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and asked timidly, Great Elder, my brother, Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Great Elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. This is a matter of the clan. What are you butting in for? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid, and did not dare to look at the Great Elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage, and walked into the ancestral hall. Once again, she bowed to the elders. Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan for the rights to the mine. He is fighting for the clan, and we don't know if he's dead or alive. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time, the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder replied coldly. Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered. Young Master Yi Lang inherits the prince's position, and it's everyone's wish. What are you yelling about? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she didn't cry, and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard, and said with a smile, What's your name? The guard quickly bowed. This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince. Yi Lang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the prince, I'll need 10 personal guards. From now on, you'll be my personal guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed, and quickly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through water and tread on fire for the prince, even if it means death. Yi Lang nodded. Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Do not hold back. Understood? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the killing intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this time, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something, and he suddenly stopped. Within the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Within the ancestral hall, all the elders began to frown. The Great Elder's eyes narrowed, and his face darkened. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang, and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Bang! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop, and charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, Your man? As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me! Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Peng! Chapter 874. Fu Wenzong Talisman Hall. Many elders of Fu Wenzong had gathered in the hall. Even some talisman masters who had not shown up for a long time had appeared in the hall. Yi Xian was among them. Moreover, his position was a little special. He was next to Shen Xinghe. On the right of Yi Xian were Fu Wenzong's Su Muqian and Lu Yong. These two could be considered as the second and third in command of Fu Wenzong. However, at this moment, these two were behind Yi Xian. Lu Yong and Su Muqian were extremely puzzled. Why? Not only the two of them, but all the experts of Fu Wenzong in the hall had the same question in their minds. Why did Shen Xinghe protect Yi Xian and offend the entire worldwide academy? At this moment, an elder suddenly said, "Sect leader, the old man is a straightforward person. Speak your mind." As he said that, he glanced at Yi Xian. "Sect leader, I feel that no matter what the reason is, I, Fu Wenzong, should not become enemies with the worldwide academy for one person. It's not worth it." A middle-aged man stood out as well. Presently, the Myriad Dimension Academy's actions are equivalent to a direct declaration of war against our talisman sect. Moreover, they've already started to act against our members, and some clans and sects that have attached themselves to us have been targeted by the Myriad Dimension Academy. If this continues, then it'll be extremely disadvantageous to our talisman sect. Very soon, one after another, Fu Wenzong experts stood out. Their meaning was simple. It was not worth becoming enemies with the worldwide academy for the sake of Yi Xian. It was not worth it at all. At this moment, another elder stood out. He looked at Yi Xian with an unfriendly expression. "Sect leader, this person is not easy to deal with. It's really..." "Shut up." At this moment, Shen Xinghe, who had been silent, suddenly said. The old man immediately stopped. The hall quietened down in an instant. Shen Xinghe glanced at the crowd. "Is it time for me to speak?" As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "Little Grandmaster, why don't you say it?" "Little Grandmaster." Hearing this, everyone in the hall was shocked and looked at Yi Xian. Lu Yong and Su Muqian also looked at Yi Xian with shock in their eyes. "Little Grandmaster?" Lu Yong looked at Shen Xinghe. "Sect Master this," Shen Xinghe said softly. "Everyone should know that something special happened in the ancestral shrine. Before that, the patriarch appeared." The patriarch had appeared. All the spectators were shocked when they heard this. Fu Xiaotian. In the hearts of Fu Wenzong and the others, this person was like a god, because there wouldn't be a Fu Wenzong without him. Meanwhile, Shen Xinghe said, "The patriarch has taken him as his personal disciple. The little grandmaster possesses the patriarch's inheritance now, and he's the hope of our Fu Wenzong, because only he has the highest chance of drawing a 7-colored talisman." A 7-colored talisman? All the spectators gazed at Yi Xian with complicated expressions. Meanwhile, Lu Yong suddenly said, "Sect Master, did the patriarch say anything else?" Shen Xinghe spoke softly. "He asked us to properly assist the little grandmaster. Of course, he said that as well. If we feel that the little grandmaster will implicate our Fu Wenzong, then we can ask him to leave. He won't say anything about it." What a joke. Meanwhile, Su Muqian spoke abruptly. "Since he obtained the patriarch's inheritance, then he belongs to us Fu Wenzong. That's because he's a member of my rune sect. How can we let him leave?" Lu Yong nodded lightly. The patriarch definitely has his reasons for doing this. As he spoke, he gazed at Yi Xian. However, the little grandmaster really is in a bad situation right now. The important matter at hand is to resolve the danger he's in. An old man spoke solemnly. "The Worldwide Academy is going too far. They clearly know that the little grandmaster belongs to me, Fu Wenzong, yet they still intend to kill him. They're not taking me, Fu Wenzong, seriously at all. Since they want to fight, then let's fight. Do you think that I, Fu Wenzong, would fear the Worldwide Academy?" A middle-aged man spoke as well. "Since the Worldwide Academy has declared war on us, then we'll fight them. Sect Master, I suggest that we immediately recall all the disciples of Fu Wenzong. Besides that, we old fellows shouldn't just stand by and do nothing. Start drawing talismans. The more the better. Besides that, it's time for those powers that owe us a favor to be repaid. Lu Yong suddenly spoke softly. Now is the time to decide who our true friends are and who are fake. As he spoke, he gazed at Shen Xinghe and said, "It's a critical moment right now, and we can't lose in terms of momentum. Because once we lose, then many powers that are hesitating will turn against the Worldwide Academy. So I suggest that we take the initiative to attack. Since we're already enemies, then we should take the initiative to gain the upper hand." When they heard this, everyone gazed at Lu Yong. Lu Yong continued, "Directly dispatch forces to kill the students of the Worldwide Academy." Meanwhile, Su Muqian hesitated for a moment before he said, "If we do that, then there'll really be no room for negotiation." Lu Yong shook his head. "The little Grandmaster is an extraordinary genius, and he's even obtained the founding ancestors' inheritance now. Under such circumstances, do you think Chen Tian would dare to allow him to live?" Su Muqian fell silent. Just as Lu Yong had said, Yi Xian was an extraordinary genius himself. His strength was so high at such a young age, and it was extremely rare even in the fifth dimension. Now, Yi Xian had obtained the inheritance of the founding ancestor Fu Wenzong. If he were to continue growing like this, then who wouldn't be afraid? So, the Worldwide Academy would absolutely not allow Yi Xian to grow. Meanwhile, Lu Yong said, "The Worldwide Academy won't let the little Grandmaster off, so they'll definitely attack. Since they'll definitely attack, then why don't we make the first move? There are two benefits to making the first move. Firstly, we'll be able to take the Worldwide Academy by surprise. Secondly, we'll be able to let the world know that our Fu Wenzong isn't afraid of the Worldwide Academy. Only in this way would those indecisive powers lean towards us." Shen Xinghe nodded. "All right," Lu Yong continued. "There's one more thing. Compared to the Worldwide Academy, our overall strength is a bit weaker. Of course, the difference isn't huge. However, if the Worldwide Academy doesn't have the help of other powers, they won't dare to fight to the death with our Fu Wenzong. Because if they fight to the death, even if our Fu Wenzong is destroyed, their Worldwide Academy will be crippled. So if I'm not wrong, the Worldwide Academy will definitely rope in other powers. And we too need to rope in other powers. Moreover, we need to rope in those superpowers." Speaking up to this point, he paused before continuing. "From now on, we need to draw more talismans. It's best if we draw some orange talismans. Also, rope in those aristocratic families and some big powers. Leave this matter to me." Shen Xinghe nodded. "I naturally don't have to worry about leaving it to you." As he spoke, he gazed at Yi Xian. "Young martial ancestor, don't leave Fu Wenzong during this period of time. Stay in the sect and study the talisman Dao well. If you're able to draw 7-colored talismans, then you'll be able to change my fate completely." Yi Xian glanced at them and said, "Everyone, even though I've obtained Master's inheritance, and I can be considered to be a member of Fu Wenzong, I have to remind all of you that I might not be a person who knows my place. Simply put, trouble follows me wherever I go. Moreover, each enemy is stronger than the last. If I stay in Fu Wenzong, then I'm afraid I'll drag Fu Wenzong down with me in the future. So, if all of you don't mind, then I can leave Fu Wenzong and absolutely won't drag Fu Wenzong down with me." If it was in the past, he would definitely want Fu Wenzong to fight to the death with the Worldwide Academy. But it was different now. He'd obtained Fu Xiaoyan's inheritance. So if he still schemed against Fu Wenzong, then he would truly be worse than a pig or a dog. So he wasn't willing to drag Fu Wenzong down with him. Meanwhile, Lu Yong spoke abruptly. "Young martial ancestor, this isn't a question of whether you'll be a burden or not. You've obtained the ancestor's inheritance, so you're a member of Fu Wenzong. If we abandon you because of fear of the Worldwide Academy, then wouldn't that disappoint countless disciples of Fu Wenzong? Moreover, how would we be able to face the ancestor's spirit in heaven? Your problem is Fu Wenzong's problem. As for the Worldwide Academy, you don't need to think too much about it. Even though our Fu Wenzong isn't as strong as the Worldwide Academy, Fu Wenzong isn't weak either. If the Worldwide Academy wants to bully us, then it won't be that easy. Su Muqian nodded. Young martial ancestor, you've just arrived in the 5th dimension, so you might not be very clear about my strength. I Fu Wenzong have inherited it for so many years. Even though I'm not a top power in the 5th dimension, there aren't any powers that dare to bully us at will. Yi Xingguan thought about it and said, Everyone, I still have some friends in the 4th dimension. They're extremely strong, so I want them to come here. Shen Xinghe said with a smile. Is it Xiao Qi and Lanxiu and the others? Yi Xingguan looked at Shen Xinghe, and the latter said with a smile. We've investigated you before, young martial ancestor. Therefore, we know a little about you and your friends, Dao Yi. Those few people are all extraordinary figures. Yi Xinghe nodded. Can they come to Fu Wenzong? Shen Xinghe said. Of course they can. However, as far as I know, they're currently guarding the 4th dimension for you. If they come. Speaking up to here, he paused and said, How about this? I'll send some people to the 4th dimension and let them guard it for you. Even though I can't guarantee that they'll be able to guard the 4th dimension well, at least they can make some people feel apprehensive. Yi Xingguan said in a deep voice. Many thanks. Shen Xinghe said with a smile. It's a piece of cake. Saying this, he looked at Su Muqian. Pick a few people and let them bring 2 orange talismans to the 4th dimension. If they meet someone they know, ask them to give me Fu Wenzong some face and not target the 4th dimension. If they meet someone they're not familiar with, say hello. If they don't leave, kill them directly. Su Muqian nodded. I'll handle this matter. Saying this, he turned around and left. Shen Xinghe looked at Yi Xinghe and said, Remember, don't go out during this period of time. Yi Xinghe nodded. I'll study the Rune Dao during this period of time. Shen Xinghe smiled and said, You've obtained martial ancestors' inheritance, so you must properly absorb it. During this period of time, I'll personally guide you. As for the matters outside, we'll handle it. Lu Yong, who was at the side, also said, Previously you were alone, but now, you're Fu Wenzong's little martial ancestor. Don't worry, no matter what happens, I, Fu Wenzong, will advance and retreat together with you. Actually, everyone was very satisfied with Yi Xingguan, not only because Yi Xingguan had obtained martial ancestor Fu Wenzong's inheritance, but also because Yi Xingguan himself was truly monstrous. Fu Wenzong did not lack people with monstrous talent in Rune Dao, but he lacked people with extremely strong combat strength. Yi Xingguan's combat strength could only be described as terrifying. In addition, he had obtained martial ancestor Fu Wenzong's inheritance. Therefore, it was completely worth it to start a war with the Worldwide Academy for Yi Xingguan. Chapter 875. Yi Xian hadn't expected Fu Wenzong to be so protective of him. After all, protecting him would mean breaking off relations with the Myriad Dimension Academy. At this moment, he could sense that these people truly wanted to protect him. Unity. Fu Wenzong was truly united. However, this was normal. Sects like this wouldn't have survived until now if they weren't united. Factions and families could have internal conflicts, but they had to be united in the face of danger. If they weren't united, only death would await them. In the remaining time, Yi Xian began to focus on the rune path. As he delved deeper into Rune Dao, he became more and more interested in Rune Dao. Rune Dao was broad and profound, and it involved many aspects. For example, if one wanted to draw a spatial talisman, one would need to have a sufficient understanding of space. If one wanted to draw a fire-based gourd, one would need to have a sufficient understanding of fire. What he drew was spatial talismans because he had the Space Dao Law. With the Space Dao Law, he could draw spatial talismans with half the effort, especially with Shen Xinghe's personal guidance. Therefore, he could now draw purple talismans with ease. When he saw that Yi Xian could draw purple talismans so quickly, Shen Xinghe was extremely excited. A genius. As far as he was concerned, Yi Xian was a genius. Fu Wenzong had picked up a treasure. As for Yi Xian, he was even more interested in the Rune Dao. Rune Dao was also a type of great path. Inside the Rune Hall, Shen Xinghe stood at the entrance with Lu Yong standing beside him. Shen Xinghe asked softly, What's the situation like now? Lu Yong replied, The Qing nation, the Heavenly Sound Palace, the Qian family, and some small sects and families have expressed their support, but not many. The weapon refining sect, the alchemy sect, the martial sect, and the Boundless Island have yet to express their support. As he spoke, he paused for a moment before he continued. They won't easily make their stand known. Or perhaps, they'll choose to watch from the sidelines. Shen Xinghe nodded. Did the female teacher from the Worldwide Academy return? A female teacher? Lu Yong's expression instantly became solemn when he heard this. Although Chun Tian was now the master of the Worldwide Academy, this female teacher was the most terrifying person in the Worldwide Academy. Not only was she powerful, but she was also influential. Among the Prophet's many students, this female teacher could be said to be very, very dazzling. This was because in the past, her knowledge was second only to the Prophet. As for her strength, no one knew how strong she was. They only knew that she was very knowledgeable and amiable. She had helped countless people, and made countless good karma. Even Fu Wenzong was indebted to him. If she wanted to fight, the academy head of the Worldwide Academy would never be Chen Tian. If she became the prefecture master, the current fifth dimension would definitely be much better. Unfortunately, after the Prophet disappeared, she also disappeared. Many people said that she went to find the Prophet. This time, if she returned, it would be very disadvantageous to Fu Wenzong, because once she opened her mouth, many powers and super experts in the fifth dimension would give her face. Lu Yong said, "There's no news of her for the time being." Shen Xinghe nodded. That's good. With her eye, Fu Wenzong really have no chance of winning. Lu Yong nodded. Yes. Shen Xinghe said, his progress is godly. He can now draw high-grade purple talismans. Moreover, it's close to perfection. Close to perfection. Hearing this, Lu Yong was somewhat shocked. Close to perfection? Shenqingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man wearing a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this time, a somewhat timid voice suddenly echoed in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look, and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling. She was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling slightly bowed to the people in the ancestral hall. She timidly said, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince. Why did you discard him for no reason? The Great Elder coldly looked at Yi Ling. This is a family matter. Why are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid. She did not dare to look at the Great Elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and entered the ancestral hall. She once again bowed to the elders on both sides. Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights. He is fighting for the clan with his life on the line. His fate is unknown. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to discard his position. This is unfair. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. Whether he discards his position or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men drag her away. At this time the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder coldly replied. Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists. She angrily said, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now he is fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered. Young Master Yi Lang inherits the prince's position. What are you yelling about? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded. Yi Ling's right cheek instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry. She only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince. Yi Lang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the prince, I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He hurriedly bowed deeply. This subordinate will go through fire and water for the prince. I will do anything for you. Yi Lang nodded. Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't hold back. Do you understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Lang's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. Inside the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe. The robe was tattered and covered in blood. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes. His face was dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this moment, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Bang! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there. He charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, Your man? As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, Prince, save me! Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being cut by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Peng! Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides there were the elders of the Yi clan. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look, and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a hint of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that Yi Xian was to be replaced, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to everyone in the hall, as she asked timidly, Great Elder, my brother, Yi Xian, is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Great Elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. This is a matter of the clan. What are you interrupting for? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid, not daring to look at the Great Elder, but she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the hall. Once again, she bowed to the elders. Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan, and it is unknown whether he is dead or alive. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. Whether or not he is crippled, it is not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time, the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder replied coldly. Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he is fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the position of prince. What are you yelling about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap! A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry, and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You are very good. After I become the prince, I will need 10 guards. From now on, you will be my guard." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the prince, even if it means death. Yi Lang nodded slightly. "Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Do not show mercy, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu did not know what he saw, but he suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, and his expression was frighteningly gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his expression turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his expression changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang, and was about to speak, when Yi Xian suddenly leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu's head spun, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there, and he rushed towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's expression turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! Chapter 876. Kill. As soon as Yi Ling finished speaking, the two old men behind her disappeared. Chi-chi. Two blood-red lights flashed past the white-robed old man's throat. His head flew off his neck without any chance to fight back. His soul was destroyed. On the ground, the white-robed old man's head rolled down. His eyes were wide open and filled with disbelief. The black-robed old man knelt on the ground and lowered his head. In fact, he did not know why his master would do this, but he did not dare to ask. When Yi Ling walked to the door, she suddenly stopped. "Pass down my order. If anyone from the Worldwide Academy dares to step into this place, kill." As she said this, she seemed to have thought of something and added, "Except for that woman." After saying this, she walked through the door. On the ground, the black-robed old man bowed respectfully. He knew who the woman his master was talking about was. Female teacher. She could be said to be the most respected person in the four-dimensional universe. As if thinking of something, the black-robed old man suddenly looked at the two old men not far away. Two respected elders. Master seems to have feelings for that Yi Xian. One of the old men said softly, "Don't touch that person. Also, pay attention to that person's movements at all times. If necessary, help him." The black-robed old man hesitated and asked, Left respected elder, why? The left respected elder said, there is no why. Just do as I say. Mushio, remember not to offend that person. After saying this, the two of them turned around and disappeared. Yixian, the black-robed old man called Mushio, thought for a moment before turning around and leaving. Worldwide Academy, inside the library. Chen Tian suddenly put down an ancient book in his hand. He looked in front of him and saw a strange black shadow standing in front of him. Chen Tian asked, dead? The black shadow nodded. Yes. Also, the Empress said that no one from the Worldwide Academy is allowed to step into the Azura Hell. Hearing this, Chen Tian frowned slightly. Why? The black shadow shook his head. I don't know. Chen Tian was silent. After a moment, Chen Tian suddenly said, is there any news of her? The black shadow man shook his head. No. Chen Tian got up and walked to the door of the book hall. He looked into the distance and asked softly, Agai, what do you think? Agai said in a low voice, man or head, we really shouldn't target that Yixian now. Chen Tian smiled and said, are you trying to say that the pagoda is no longer in his hands? Moreover, he has obtained Patriarch Fu Wenzong's inheritance, so Fu Wenzong will protect him with his life. So we shouldn't go against him? Agai nodded. There's no point in targeting him now. If the manor head is worried about him growing up, in my opinion, there's really no need for that. Once he grows up, that's a matter for the future. Moreover, as long as we're strong enough, why would we need to fear him? Chen Tian shook his head. I'm not targeting him. Agai said, please enlighten me, Chief. Chen Tian suddenly asked, Agai, what do you think of our Worldwide Academy's position in the five-dimensional universe? Tell me the truth. After a moment of silence, Agai said, it's far from what it used to be. The current Worldwide Academy could be said to be worlds apart from when the Prophet was still around. Chen Tian chuckled and said, today our Worldwide Academy is getting worse day by day. If this continues, at most in 100 years, at that time, if our Worldwide Academy doesn't produce a super evildoer, our Worldwide Academy will completely disappear from the five-dimensional universe. This isn't an alarmist talk, because our Worldwide Academy has something that everyone in the five-dimensional universe wants. Worldwide Bookstore. This bookstore was left behind by the Prophet. In the five-dimensional universe, no one could resist the temptation of this bookstore. And now, these forces were still a little afraid of the Worldwide Academy, so they didn't dare to force their way in. After all, the Prophet's prestige was still there, and that female teacher was still alive. However, if this continued, the Worldwide Academy would only become weaker and weaker. Unless, as Chen Tian said, a super genius appeared in the Worldwide Academy. The kind of super evildoer that could change the structure of the five-dimensional universe. However, the Worldwide Academy couldn't pin its hopes on this kind of illusory thing. At this time, Chen Tian said, the reason why we want to kill Yixian is because that Xiao Ta has already recognized him as his master. Hearing this, Agai's expression changed. Recognized him as his master? Chen Tian nodded. If he didn't recognize him as his master, then Xiao Ta definitely wouldn't cooperate with him. To put it simply, the biggest threat to us in the five-dimensional universe is this Yixian. Agai was silent. If this Xiao Ta had already recognized Yixian as his master, then just like what Chen Tian said, this Yixian was really the biggest threat to the Worldwide Academy. This meant that Yixian had a high chance of obtaining the Worldwide Bookstore. As for others, even if they obtained the World Prism Pagoda, they might not be able to open the Worldwide Bookstore. This was because in order to open the Worldwide Bookstore, the World Prism Pagoda must cooperate. Chen Tian continued. Moreover, right now everyone is looking at our Worldwide Academy. They want to see how much strength our Worldwide Academy has. And this time, if we don't shock them, those forces will start to target us. Speaking up to here, he paused and then said, actually, I made a wrong move from the beginning. But now, I can only make mistakes step by step. There is no turning back. Agai said softly, Palace Master is gambling with the Academy. Chen Tian smiled and said, right now if we don't gamble, we can only die a slow death. Saying this, he shook his head and smiled. Everyone says that I, Chen Tian, usurped her position as palace master. What's funny is that I strongly recommended her to be palace master, but she still let go and left. This time, she left for so many years. A guy was silent. He was still relatively clear about what happened in the past. That year, Chen Tian did not have the intention to fight for the position of palace master. This was because the female teacher was too dazzling. As long as she wanted it, the position of palace master would definitely belong to her. Unfortunately, that female teacher did not have the slightest intention of becoming the palace master. Agai sighed softly. I wonder where she is now. If that female teacher was here, the position of the Worldwide Academy in the fifth dimension would be greatly different. Unfortunately, after she left the Worldwide Academy, she never came back. At this time, Chen Tian suddenly said, "Let her be. Our current top priority is to get rid of this Yi Xian. This person can make the pagoda recognize him as its master. We must get rid of him." Agai said, "What about the woman in the fourth dimension? The woman in the plain dress?" Hearing this, Chen Tian's expression suddenly became solemn. After a moment, Chen Tian shook his head. "Don't provoke this person for now. I will personally go down and meet this person another day." Agai nodded. Now there are already many forces standing on Fu Wenzong's side. Fu Wenzong has already laid his hands on our people. Some of the disciples outside have already been killed by Fu Wenzong. Chen Tian said calmly, "Ask all the martial masters in Wuyuan to come back. Also, pass down the order that the students who are studying outside must immediately return to the academy. Those who do not return within 3 days will be treated as traitors of the academy." Saying this, he paused and said, "Ask the people from the martial arts pavilion to get ready." Martial arts pavilion. Hearing this, Agai's expression became solemn. She knew that once the people from the martial arts pavilion were sent out, it would mean that it was a real battle of life and death. However, now everyone was watching the Worldwide Academy. If the Worldwide Academy did not do anything, then the prestige of the Worldwide Academy in the fifth dimension would plummet. Fu Wenzong. In the first hall, Yi Xian had already started to draw an orange talisman, which was also a space-type orange talisman. He did not draw other types of talismans for now, because he was more proficient in space-type talismans. Therefore, he wanted to familiarize himself with space-type talismans first. It had to be said that the orange talisman was much more difficult than the purple talisman. Especially one point, which was that it could not be carved. It had to be done in one stroke. It could be said that there was no room for mistakes. During this period, Shen Xinghe had been giving pointers at the side. After a long time, Shen Xinghe quietly left the hall. Lu Yong was waiting in front of the hall. When he saw Shen Xinghe come out, he quickly asked, "How was it?" Shen Xinghe was silent. Lu Yong frowned slightly. "What? Did it not go well?" Shen Xinghe shook his head. "It is not that it did not go well, but it went too well." His understanding of space-type talismans is so deep that it is a little abnormal. In addition, the talismans he drew are different from ours. Lu Yong was puzzled. "What do you mean?" Shen Xinghe opened his palm, and in his hand was an orange talisman. "Look," Lu Yong said in a low voice. "This was drawn by him?" Shen Xinghe nodded. "Take a closer look." Lu Yong looked at the orange talisman, and very quickly his face changed. "There is a qi in this talisman, and it is different from ours." This is? Shen Xinghe said in a low voice. "Chaos qi." Hearing this, Lu Yong's face changed abruptly. How can he have this kind of chaos qi? Shen Xinghe shook his head. "I don't know." As he said this, he looked into the hall and said softly, "He is too mysterious." Lu Yong said in a low voice. "No matter what, he is now one of my people, Fu Wenzong. To me this is a good thing." Shen Xinghe nodded. "How is the Worldwide Academy?" Lu Yong said, "There might be some big movements soon. It seems that Chen Tian will not let this matter rest." Shen Xinghe said indifferently, "If he wants to play, then we will play with him to the end." As he said this, he looked at Lu Yong. "How many orange talismans do we have now?" Lu Yong said, "More than 200. Shen Xinghe nodded. "Take out half and invite people from Nifa's city. Invite as many as you can." Lu Yong hesitated for a moment. and then he said, "Those fellows aren't easy to deal with." Shen Xinghe nodded. "They only care about money, not people. That's exactly what we need right now. Besides that, send some people to receive Shaoqi and the others. They are all extraordinary geniuses. If they come to Fu Wenzong, then it will be extremely beneficial to Fu Wenzong." Lu Yong nodded slightly. "I've already sent some people to receive them. There shouldn't be any mishaps." Shen Xinghe said in a low voice, "Just in case, you should make a trip there yourself." Lu Yong nodded slightly. "All right." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Shen Xinghe remained silent for a moment, and then he turned around and returned to the hall. He was stunned when he saw Yi Xian. There was a perfect orange talisman in front of Yi Xian. Chapter 877. A perfect orange talisman. Undeniably, Shen Xinghe was extremely shocked at this moment. Although it was difficult to draw a perfect purple talisman, there were quite a few people in Fu Wenzong who could draw such a perfect purple talisman. On the other hand, apart from him, there was only one other elder in Fu Wenzong who could draw a perfect orange talisman. How old were he and that elder? How old was Yi Xian? A perfect orange talisman. At this moment, Shen Xinghe finally understood why Fu Xiaotian had accepted Yi Xian as his disciple. Yi Xian was really a genius in talisman Dao, a super genius. At this moment, he truly believed that Yi Xian could draw a 7-colored talisman. Beside him, Yi Xian slumped on the chair. He had to admit that drawing an orange talisman was really too tiring. For a full 6 hours, he did not even dare to blink his eyes. This was the first time he had been so focused on one thing. He had no choice but to focus, because the slightest mistake would greatly reduce the quality of the orange talisman. However, it was really tiring. At this time, Shen Xinghe suddenly smiled and asked, "How do you feel?" Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "Very tiring." Shen Xinghe laughed heartily. "It's still okay for you. If it was someone else, they would need at least a month to draw an orange talisman. If it was a perfect orange talisman, they would need at least 3 months." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why?" Shen Xinghe smiled. "Because of your stamina. Drawing talisman consumes a lot of stamina and mental strength. Moreover, your physical body and divine soul are extremely strong, so you can focus on drawing for such a long time. It can be said that in this aspect, you have a unique advantage." Yi Xian smiled. "If I keep drawing talisman, I will not be able to bear it." Shen Xinghe smiled faintly. "It's already very good. You can be considered as a heavenly talisman master now." Yi Xian looked at Shen Xinghe. "Heaven talisman master?" Shen Xinghe smiled and said, "Yes. In the Tao of talismans, there were elementary talisman master, advanced talisman master, master Fu Wenzong, earth talisman master, and heaven talisman master. Above them was the divine talisman master, the divine talisman master. As for our 5-dimensional universe, only the prophet and patriarch were considered divine talisman masters." Yi Xian said in a low voice. "So, I'm only one step away from becoming a divine talisman master, right?" Shen Xinghe nodded. "You can say that." Yi Xian nodded. "Understood." Shen Xinghe smiled. "Do you want to give it a try?" Yi Xian shook his head. "I've already tried. No way." The reason why it was so difficult to draw a 7-colored talisman was because it required the addition of 7 different types of energy: metal, wood, water, fire, earth, lightning, as well as chaotic energy. These 7 types of energy could be obtained anywhere, but the difficult part was to fuse them together. He had tried it just now, but it was still very difficult. This was because he was currently proficient in the power of space and the power of earth. He was not familiar with the other types of energy at all. Therefore, he was completely unable to draw a 7-colored talisman. At the side, Shen Xinghe smiled. "This 7-colored talisman cannot be rushed. You are already good enough for now. Take it slow, step by step." Yi Xian nodded and looked at Shen Xinghe. "Old Shen, I want to ask you about something." Shen Xinghe said, "What is it?" Yi Xian said, "Old Shen, do you know about the Azura Hell?" Shen Xinghe nodded. "Of course I do. There is a great empress living there. Moreover, she is a peerless great empress. She is one of the 6 super experts of the 5-dimensional universe. Yi Xian was somewhat curious. 6 super experts. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. Shen Xinghe nodded. These 6 people are the female teacher of the Worldwide Academy, the Azura Empress of the Azura Hell, the broken daughter of the Master of the Myriad Dimensions, Jian Shui of the Blue Dome of the Heavens, the Old Undying of the Banished Immortal City. At this point, he paused before continuing. The Old Undying of the Banished Immortal City is also known as Li Mubai. This person's blade technique is peerless. He has lived his entire life in the Banished Immortal City. He only left the city once when he challenged the Prophet. Challenged the Prophet? Yi Xian hurriedly asked. What was the result? Shen Xinghe said solemnly. Back then, this person carried an ancient saber on his back and headed to the Myriad Dimensional Academy. He didn't enter the Myriad Dimensional Academy. Instead, he slashed out 3 times outside the Myriad Dimensional Academy. After slashing out 3 times, he sat in front of the city gate for a month. Yi Xian asked again. Did he win or lose? Shen Xinghe shook his head. I don't know. However, after he returned, he became even more powerful. And now, this banished immortal's strength is probably beyond our understanding. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian asked again. What about the other one? Shen Xinghe smiled. The tomb guardian of the void dimension. The void dimension? Yi Xian said in a low voice. I've heard of this place. It's said that it's very dangerous? Shen Xinghe nodded. There are 3 forbidden areas in the 5th dimension. The Boundless Ghost City, the Land of Eternal Life, and the Void Dimension. Yi Xian asked. Elder Shen, what kind of place is the Land of Eternal Life? Shen Xinghe said. I don't know what kind of place the Land of Eternal Life is. No one knows either. All I know is that there is the number 1 sword in the 5th dimension, the Sword of Eternal Life. Rumor has it that there is the power of eternal life. If you enter the Land of Eternal Life and obtain this sword, you will obtain the power of eternal life. However, no one knows if it's true or not. Yi Xian was puzzled. Has no one ever entered it? Shen Xinghe said. Naturally, some people have been there. However, those who entered are basically dead. There are only 2 who didn't die. One is the Shura Empress, and the other is the Prophet. The Sword of Eternal Life, Yi Xian said in a low voice. Miss Lian Qian, did you enter the Land of Eternal Life with the Prophet? The reason why he asked about this place was that he had promised the Devil Lord to see if he could resurrect the woman in the coffin. Lian Qian said, Master went there, I didn't. However, Master took Big Sister there. So, Big Sister should be more clear about the situation there. Speaking of this, she paused and said, However, I did go to the Boundless Ghost City and the Void Dimension with Master. Yi Xian asked quickly, How was it? Lian Qian said calmly, I know you are curious about everything. However, I have to warn you, don't even think about these 3 places. Even the 6 super experts that the old man mentioned, just now don't dare to step into these 3 places easily. Yi Xian said in a low voice, It's that dangerous? Lian Qian said, It's very dangerous. Of course, if you can let the woman in the plain dress take you there, then it won't be a problem. Yi Xian smiled. It seemed that Miss Lian Qian approved of the woman in the plain dress. At this time, Lian Qian said, I think that as long as that woman doesn't want to die, there should be no force in this world that can kill her. The woman in the plain dress. He had to admit that he missed the woman in the plain dress a little. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and looked at Shen Xinghe and said, Old Shen, I mainly want to ask about the Shura Empress. Where is the Land of Azura? Shen Xinghe frowned slightly. You want to go to the Land of Azura? Yi Xian nodded. Come to the 5th dimension. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. After leaving the universe, he'd always been concerned about one thing, and that was Yi Ling. Shen Xinghe said in a low voice, You can't go there. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Shen Xinghe's expression became solemn. That place is very dangerous. Moreover, the Worldwide Academy is constantly watching you. It's too dangerous for you to go there. Yi Xian fell silent. Shen Xinghe asked again, Why do you want to go to the Land of Azura? Yi Xian said, I want to go and have a look. Shen Xinghe glanced at Yi Xian. I don't care what your reason is, but you really can't go there. This place doesn't welcome outsiders, especially the Shura Empress. She's cruel and merciless, and she kills at the slightest disagreement. She doesn't care who you are. In her eyes, there are only the living and the dead. Yi Xian hesitated for a while and said, Actually, she's quite kind. Shen Xinghe was dumbfounded. The Shura Empress is kind? Shen Xinghe's expression became strange. Could it be that the little grandmaster's brain had gone haywire when he was drawing runes? At this moment Yi Xian said, Old Shen, don't worry. I won't go there for now. He knew that Yi Ling was the Shura Empress, and the current Yi Ling was definitely very powerful. If he went to look for Yi Ling now, he wouldn't be able to do anything. However, he firmly believed that Yi Ling was still the same Yi Ling. She hadn't changed. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Shen Xinghe was relieved. Yes, although your strength isn't bad, there are still many places that are very dangerous for you. The most important thing for you now is to study the Tao of Runes. At this moment, Su Muqian suddenly appeared in the hall. Shen Xinghe looked at Su Muqian. What's wrong? Su Muqian said in a deep voice. Something happened. Shen Xinghe frowned slightly. Speak, Su Muqian said. Elder Lu Yong went to pick up little grandmaster's friends. They were surrounded by the Worldwide Academy. This time, the Worldwide Academy directly sent out the Martial Arts Pavilion's men. The leader is the Martial Arts Hall Master, Wu Lin. Yi Xian suddenly stood up. At this moment, Shen Xinghe shook his head. Little grandmaster, please wait. Yi Xian looked at Shen Xinghe. Shen Xinghe said in a deep voice. If they are from the Martial Arts Pavilion, it means that they are completely capable of killing Elder Lu and the others. They surrounded Elder Lu Yong and the others, because they obviously want us to rescue them. In other words, they want you to rescue them. Their real target is you. Yi Xian asked, Is the Martial Arts Pavilion very powerful? Shen Xinghe said in a deep voice, Very powerful. It is a hall created by the prophet of the Myriad Dimensions Academy. The people inside are the most monstrous prodigies in Wuyuan. These people are extremely powerful. Yi Xian said, They are in danger. He knew that Xiao Qi and the others were very powerful. But he also knew that the Worldwide Academy wasn't as simple as it seemed. Without thinking much, Yi Xian was about to leave. At this moment, Shen Xinghe suddenly said, Don't go. I will go personally. And Yi Xian had already disappeared. Seeing this, Shen Xinghe's expression changed. He quickly said, Gather all the experts in the sect. Protect him at all costs. Su Muqian immediately turned and left. Shen Xinghe also left quickly. After Yi Xian left Fu Wenzong, he immediately contacted Xiao Qi. Thus, he rode on his sword and disappeared into the horizon. Approximately 1 hour later, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. In front of him stood a middle-aged man. Chen Tian. Chen Tian looked at Yi Xian and smiled. I have been waiting for you for a long time. P.S. I have been waiting for your tickets for a long time. End of this chapter. Chapter 878. Just as Shen Xinghe said, the Worldwide Academy's target this time was Yi Xian. If Yi Xian stayed with Fu Wenzong, the Worldwide Academy couldn't do anything to him. After all, the Worldwide Academy couldn't go all out to attack Fu Wenzong, because the price would be too high. Lure Yi Xian out. This was the lowest price. Yi Xian looked at Chen Tian with a calm expression. Chen Tian chuckled. You are very calm. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. There is one thing I don't understand. Xiao Tao is no longer with me. Why do you insist on biting me? Chen Tian looked at Yi Xian. Because it has recognized you as its master. Yi Xian asked. Because of this? Chen Tian nodded. Because of this. Yi Xian looked around and said with a smile. Are you alone? Chen Tian smiled. Is it not enough? Yi Xian nodded. I'm afraid it's not enough. Chen Tian looked at Yi Xian. Why don't you try? Just as he said that, he opened his palm, and was about to make a move. Yi Xian suddenly opened his right hand, and an ancient book appeared in his hand. Book Realm. Seeing this book, Chen Tian's expression changed. The next moment, both of them entered the Book Realm. After entering the Book Realm, Chen Tian's realm was suppressed from Heaven's secret realm to Life and Death realm. An entire realm was suppressed. Chen Tian's expression turned ugly. This book realm was his treasure. Now, Yi Xian was using his treasure to deal with him. Far away, Yi Xian opened his palm, and the executing heaven sword appeared in his hand. He walked towards Chen Tian and smiled. Come, let's exchange 2 moves. As soon as he finished speaking, he transformed into a ray of sword light, and vanished on the spot. On the other side, Chen Tian's expression was calm. When the sword light was about to hit him, he suddenly punched out. He did not rely on the power of the talisman, but purely his own strength. This punch, boom! Yi Xian's sword light was forced to a halt, unable to advance any further. Chen Tian looked at Yi Xian with a sneer. Do you think that by suppressing me by 1 realm, you can? At that moment, a red glow suddenly appeared on the tip of the executing heaven sword in Yi Xian's hand. The next moment, boom! Chen Tian was instantly sent flying. By the time Chen Tian stopped, his right fist had already split open and blood was flowing out. Chen Tian looked at Yi Xian from afar. His face was incomparably gloomy. Word spirit. Just now, Yi Xian had directly used the word spirit of the annihilation word. At this moment, Chen Tian completely put away his contempt. The book realm suppressed his realm, and the power of the word spirit of the annihilation word spirit could not be underestimated, especially when Yi Xian had integrated the word spirit into the sword. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. Chi! A ray of sword light flashed through the book realm. Chen Tian opened his palm, and a powerful force gathered in his palm. When Yi Xian's sword arrived in front of him, he suddenly waved his palm, and directly used his palm to block Yi Xian's sword. Rumble! The surrounding bookshelves trembled in fear. Although both of them were extremely powerful, the book realm was extremely stable. Even the surrounding bookshelves were not damaged in the slightest. At this moment, Yi Xian held the sword and suddenly spun. Kacha! Chen Tian's palm directly split open, and his whole body rapidly retreated. Yi Xian was about to exert force again, when Chen Tian's right foot suddenly lightly stamped on the ground. He stopped, and his left hand suddenly punched forward. A powerful force swept towards Yi Xian like a tide. Yi Xian directly ignored this force, and fiercely spun the sword with both hands. Chi! Bang! Yi Xian's whole body directly flew out, and Chen Tian's right hand was cut in half by Yi Xian. After Yi Xian stopped, a trace of blood slowly flowed from the corner of his mouth. Yi Xian licked the blood from the corner of his mouth and said with a smile, I haven't tasted blood in a long time. Fight! After coming to the 5th dimension, he rarely fought. But at this moment, when he fought with Chen Tian, he once again found the feeling of fighting with his life on the line. Chen Tian looked at Yi Xian and said, You will taste even more. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly jumped. Holding the sword with both hands, he fiercely slashed at Chen Tian. The sword slashed down and sword light flashed. Below, Chen Tian glanced at Yi Xian, and the next moment, his body directly turned illusory. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed. He was about to withdraw his sword when a powerful force suddenly exploded on his back. Bang! Yi Xian directly flew out, and the moment he was sent flying, a fist with an explosive sound went straight towards his head. Yi Xian horizontally blocked it. Bang! The executing heaven sword in Yi Xian's hand violently trembled, and then his whole body directly hit a distant bookcase. Just as he stopped, Chen Tian suddenly appeared in front of him. Chen Tian directly kicked Yi Xian's head. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly stabbed his sword towards Chen Tian's throat. A life for a life. At this time, Chen Tian suddenly withdrew his hand, and Yi Xian's sword pierced through empty air. In the distance, Chen Tian looked at Yi Xian. In the end, he did not exchange a life for a life with Yi Xian, because he was not sure that he could kill Yi Xian with a single palm strike. After all, Yi Xian's body was too strong, and his own body had no way to withstand Yi Xian's sword. Yi Xian's sword itself was extremely sharp, and on top of that, he also had the word spirit. Not to mention his current body, even if his realm was not suppressed, he would not dare to use his own neck to withstand Yi Xian's sword. After Yi Xian forced Chen Tian to retreat, his right hand tightly gripped the executing heaven sword in his hand. He had to admit that he had somewhat underestimated Chen Tian's strength. Although the other party was tightly suppressed by him, his strength was still very strong. At this time, Chen Tian's body suddenly floated up, and a white fog suddenly appeared around him. Yi Xian frowned. This is... Lian Qian's voice sounded in his mind. Be careful, this is the scholarly aura. Yi Xian was about to speak when the scholarly aura on Chen Tian's body suddenly transformed into a white dragon and flew out, and the white dragon pounced directly at Yi Xian. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he took a step forward. He held the sword with both hands and slashed forward, and a wisp of red light silently appeared on the tip of the sword. Bang! As Yi Xian's sword slashed down, the white dragon was immediately forced to a stop. However, a large amount of white fog drowned Yi Xian, and his body had just come into contact with the scholarly aura, when his body immediately started to corrode and fester. Yi Xian was shocked, and he did not dare to resist it head-on. He immediately dodged, and at this moment, the white dragon suddenly roared, and then it charged towards him. Yi Xian stabbed out with his sword. A boundless sword. Bang! As the sword stabbed out, the white dragon directly exploded, and Yi Xian himself disappeared in an instant. In the distance, Chen Tian, who was about to attack, suddenly frowned, and he glanced at the surroundings, but he did not see any traces of Yi Xian. At this moment, he suddenly turned around, and as soon as he did, a wisp of sword light arrived in front of his forehead. Chen Tian's right hand suddenly clenched forward, and this clench directly grabbed Yi Xian's executing heaven sword. At this moment, Yi Xian's right hand that was holding the sword spun. Swish! Chen Tian's 5 fingers were directly chopped off by the executing heaven sword. But at this moment, Chen Tian's fist also smashed against Yi Xian's chest. Bang! Yi Xian instantly retreated explosively, and in the process his executing heaven sword suddenly flew out. Flying sword. In the distance, Chen Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and a white brush suddenly flew out from between his brows, and this white brush directly touched Yi Xian's executing heaven sword. Bang! The executing heaven sword trembled violently, and directly flew out. In the distance, Yi Xian reached out and grasped, and the executing heaven sword fell into his hand, but his whole body trembled. It's the executing heaven brush. At this moment, Lian Qian's voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. The executing heaven brush. Yi Xian glanced at the executing heaven brush in Chen Tian's hand, and asked, Can you hook it up? Lian Qian replied, Yes. Yi Xian's heart was filled with joy, but at this time Lian Qian said, You have to first let that brush leave his mind control. Only then can I establish a connection with that brush. Yi Xian asked in a low voice, How do I do that? Chapter 879. The sword pierced through his eyebrows like a stone falling into the sea. Yi Xian's body trembled slightly, and then stopped moving. In the distance, Chen Tian was stunned. Soon, Chen Tian's expression changed, because he found that he had lost contact with the brush. Chen Tian stared at Yi Xian. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Yi Xian greedily took a deep breath and smiled. Dean Chen Tian, thank you. Chen Tian looked at Yi Xian with a sharp gaze. How did you do it? He knew that his punishment heaven brush must have fallen into Yi Xian's hands. Yi Xian grinned. Why don't you guess? Chen Tian was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. Chi. The person disappeared, and the sword light appeared. Yi Xian's sword was extremely fast. It could be said that he had raised his sword speed to the extreme. Moreover, he was using the immeasurable sword, and the word spirit of the extinguished character on the tip of the sword. Therefore, the power of this sword was extremely powerful. If it was outside, this sword was enough to split the space. However, this was the book realm. With the strength of Yi Xian and Chen Tian, they couldn't break the world inside. Opposite Yi Xian, Chen Tian looked at Yi Xian. When the sword was several zhang away from him, he suddenly disappeared. Chi. Yi Xian's sword pierced through the air. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Lian Qian suddenly said, He left. Yi Xian's face darkened. How could he leave? Lian Qian said, After all, he used to control the book realm. He knows the power and boundaries of the book realm very well. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, In other words, he is outside now. Lian Qian said. Yes. Yi Xian was silent. As if she knew what Yi Xian was thinking, Lian Qian continued. With this book realm, you don't need to be afraid of him. If he wants to fight, just take him in. Of course, it will be difficult for you to kill him with your current strength. Yi Xian nodded. I know. If he wanted to kill Chen Tian, he wouldn't stand a chance unless he used the power of his bloodline. And once he used the power of his bloodline, he couldn't control himself. This was the most depressing part for him. Yi Xian was about to leave when Lian Qian suddenly said, Wait a moment. You should first master this brush before you leave. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he asked, How long? He was still worried about Xiao Qi and the others. Lian Qian said, With the help of this brush, it will be very fast. Yi Xian nodded. Then let's begin. In less than an hour, Yi Xian had truly gained control of the Heaven Punishment brush. This pen had 3 forms: attack, defense, and copy. It could be said that if his sword wasn't a celestial sword, he wouldn't be able to break through the defense of this brush. The copy ability was quite terrifying. It could copy some extremely powerful divine abilities and sword techniques. Of course, he wasn't thinking about its might, but that it could be used to frame others. Currently, he had the Executing Heaven Sword, Soul Suppressing Sword, Myriad Dimensional Mirror, Heaven Punishment Brush, and Book World. It was also because of these treasures that he was able to fight Chen Tian, especially the Book World. If it wasn't for the Book World suppressing Chen Tian's realm, he wouldn't be able to fight Chen Tian, even if he had these treasures. The Book World was the foundation for him to fight above his realm. After leaving the Book World, Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings. Chen Tian was no longer there. As if he thought of something, Yi Xian asked, Miss Lian Qian, are there many treasures in the Worldwide Academy? Lian Qian said, A lot. They should be in the hands of Chen Tian. Yi Xian nodded and asked again, Are they familiar with you? Lian Qian said, Many of them are familiar with me. However, there are also some that I'm not familiar with. Not only are they unfamiliar with me, but they've also fought with me before. Of course, they can't beat me, because my big sister is very powerful. Yi Xian, Lian Qian said again, he still has something on him. The next time you meet him, you have to be careful of him taking it out. You. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly looked up. In the distance, several powerful auras were rushing over. They were Shen Xinghe, Fu Wenzong, and the other experts. Shen Xinghe appeared in front of Yi Xian. Seeing that Yi Xian was fine, he instantly heaved a sigh of relief. As if thinking of something, he hurriedly asked, Have you fought with Chen Tian? Yi Xian nodded. Shen Xinghe glanced at Yi Xian. He's dead? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. How could that be? It's just that he couldn't do anything to me, so he left. Shen Xinghe took a deep look at Yi Xian. We still underestimated your strength. He was very clear about Chen Tian's strength. Logically speaking, he was not someone that Yi Xian could fight against. However, Yi Xian was still alive. Shen Xinghe collected his thoughts and looked at Yi Xian. Little Grandmaster, don't take such risks next time. Yi Xian nodded. All right. Shen Xinghe shook his head and smiled. You're just brushing me off. Yi Xian smiled. Old Shen, let's not talk about this for now. Let's save my friends first. Shen Xinghe nodded. Let's go. Yi Xian rode on his flying sword. At this moment, Shen Xinghe pointed his finger, and an orange talisman was stuck on Yi Xian's sword. In an instant, Yi Xian's flying sword's speed increased explosively. Yi Xian was shocked. His speed had increased by at least 30%. This was too terrifying. One had to admit that the rune Dao of the 5th dimension was really strong. Soon, the group disappeared into the vast horizon. Somewhere above the sea of clouds, Xiao Qi, Lian Wanli, and Enlanxia were standing on a cloud. In front of the 3 of them was an old man. This old man was Lu Yong. Around the 4 of them was a net that seemed to be weaved by lightning. This net covered the space around the 4 of them. Outside this net stood an old man. This old man was wearing a white robe and had his hands behind his back. Behind him were 9 people. These 9 people were very young, no more than 20 years old. However, the aura emitted from these people was extremely powerful. Martial Arts Pavilion. These were the students of the martial arts pavilion. They could be said to be the elites of the elites in Wuyuan. And the old man leading them was the martial arts pavilion's pavilion master, Wu Chuan. This was an expert who had been famous for many years. In the distance, Lian Wanli, who was beside Xiao Qi, suddenly said, "Are we just going to wait like this?" Lu Yong nodded. "Wait for the people from my sect to come." Lian Wanli said, "It's not like we can't beat them." Lu Yong smiled bitterly. "Young lady, you might not know, but do you see the lightning net around us? This net is a huge array. Once you move, it will immediately activate and attract countless lightning to descend. At that time, those people outside will immediately make their move. We will be surrounded by enemies." Lian Wanli said, "But it is not good for us to wait like this." Lu Yong nodded. "I know. I have already received the news. Our Fu Wenzong experts will arrive in 15 minutes at most." Lian Wanli looked at Xiao Qi. "How strong are those people?" Xiao Qi glanced at Wu Chuan and the others. After a short moment of silence, she said, "I can only fight that old man." Lian Wanli looked at Enlancio. "Can the two of us defeat the others?" Enlancio glanced at the students of the martial arts pavilion. "No problem." Lu Yong was speechless. Right at this moment, Chen Tian suddenly appeared in front of Wu Chuan. Lu Yong's face instantly sank when he saw Chen Tian. Chen Tian glanced at Lu Yong and the others before he said, "Attack." As soon as he finished speaking, Wu Chuan, who stood behind him, suddenly opened his palm. And then a bolt of lightning suddenly flew out. Meanwhile, the lightning net suddenly trembled. In the next moment, countless bolts of lightning that were thick like pillars descended from the sky. Lu Yong's expression changed when he witnessed this scene. He suddenly soared into the sky and waved his right hand. An orange talisman suddenly flew out, and then a flaming shield appeared above him in the next moment. Meanwhile, the bolts of lightning descended. Bang! The flaming shield instantly cracked apart. Meanwhile, Lu Yong waved his right hand again, and an orange talisman shot into the sky. In an instant, the flaming shield was transformed into a sea of flames. Meanwhile, Chen Tian suddenly gazed at Xiao Qi's group of three. In the next moment, he suddenly took a step forward. Meanwhile, Xiao Qi, who was seated cross-legged in midair, suddenly raised her head, and then she took a step forward and slashed with her sword. Bang! Her sword slashed down, and Chen Tian was forced to stop in front of Xiao Qi. But right at this moment, Chen Tian suddenly smashed his left fist forward. His fist was like a collapsing mountain, and it carried an oppressive force that seemed capable of obliterating the world. At this moment, Chen Tian's cultivation hadn't been suppressed, and he was able to exert 100% of his strength. Xiao Qi's expression remained unchanged as she raised her sword to block it. Bang! Xiao Qi's sword wasn't able to block the force of Chen Tian's punch, and her entire body was blasted flying. Chen Tian was just about to attack again when a spear tore through the sky from the side. The spear was like a thunderclap, and it was swift to the point it couldn't be seen by the eye. Chen Tian frowned slightly, and then he turned around and tapped with his finger. This tap directly struck the tip of the spear. Bang! The spear shook violently, and Enlancio was blasted flying along with her spear. But right at this moment, a dragon roar resounded. Chen Tian turned around and saw a saber descending straight towards his head, and there was the soul of an azure dragon on the saber. Chen Tian took a step back, and he suddenly smashed his fist forward when the saber arrived around 1.5 m away from his head. Bang! The soul of the azure dragon exploded apart, and Chen Tian was blasted flying along with his saber. But right at this moment, a sword and a spear suddenly appeared behind him. Chen Tian turned around and pushed his arms forward. Rumble! The space in the surroundings trembled, and Xiao Qi and Enlancio retreated repeatedly. However, Chen Tian had retreated by over 10 m as well. After Chen Tian stopped, his expression became extremely gloomy, and he didn't conceal his killing intent at all as he gazed at Enlancio and the others. Monstrous geniuses! He hadn't expected that there would be so many monstrous geniuses besides Yi Xian in the fourth dimension. Moreover, these three people were on the same side as Yi Xian, once they were allowed to grow. When he thought up to here, the killing intent in Chen Tian's eyes grew denser. After a moment of silence, Chen Tian suddenly said, "Attack!" As soon as he finished speaking, he charged forward while Wu Chuan and the others followed behind him. Obviously, he intended to kill Xiaoqi and the others here. In the distance, Xiaoqi was just about to attack when she suddenly looked to her right. An ray of light tore through the sky towards her. Chen Tian stopped, turned around and saw Yi Xian. In next to no time, Yi Xian appeared not too far away from Chen Tian. Chen Tian gazed at Yi Xian and was about to speak. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly looked at Xiaoqi. "Can you hold him back?" Xiaoqi fell silent for a moment, and then she said, "How long?" Yi Xian raised a finger. 15 minutes. I'll kill everyone in 15 minutes. Everyone was speechless. Chapter 880. Arrogant. When they heard Yi Xian's words, the faces of Wu Yuan and the other experts turned gloomy. What did Yi Xian take them for? Were they chickens, ducks, cows, or sheep? Shen Xinghe and the others who followed him were shocked as well. Kill everyone except Chen Tian in 15 minutes? Was he serious? One had to know that these people were the elites of the Myriad Dimension Academy. Xiaoqi nodded when she heard Yi Xian's words. Sure. As soon as she finished speaking, she stretched out her hand, and a sword suddenly flew out from Yi Xian's body. It was the sword that originally belonged to Xiaoqi. Xiaoqi closed her eyes slowly while holding the sword in her hand. After a moment of silence, she suddenly looked at Chen Tian. A sword light flashed in her eyes, and the sword in her hand burst out like a bolt of lightning. It slashed straight at Chen Tian. In the distance, Chen Tian suddenly said, "Be careful of this person." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished on the spot. Boom! In the battlefield, a sword light suddenly exploded. At this moment, Yi Xian rushed out with a boundless sword. He didn't directly target Wu Chuan, because he was the strongest person on Wu Yuan's side apart from Chen Tian. He wasn't confident that he could instantly kill Wu Chuan. He would kill the easy ones first. As soon as Yi Xian vanished, Wu Chuan vanished as well. He took a step forward, raised his hands and pressed down lightly. Fall! Rumble! The space in front of Wu Chuan suddenly fell layer by layer like a curtain of rain. However, Yi Xian passed through this curtain of rain with ease. Space Dao Law. Seeing this scene, Wu Chuan's expression changed drastically. He turned his head abruptly, and behind him, a martial arts hall student's head had already flown off. This martial arts hall student raised his hands high. Obviously he had sensed Yi Xian, but he was too slow. If he was any slower, he would have lost his life. When Yi Xian killed this martial arts hall student with a single slash, he immediately vanished. Wu Chuan's face turned ferocious as he glanced at his surroundings. At this moment, a ray of sword light suddenly appeared on his right. This sword light appeared without any warning. Wu Chuan's face paled. Be careful. Not far away, that martial arts hall cadet reacted very quickly. When this wisp of sword light appeared, he punched out with his right hand. Chi! Yi Xian's sword directly cut off that student's hand. That student wanted to retreat, but Yi Xian's sword was faster and instantly pierced through his forehead. Chi! Blood splattered everywhere. And Yi Xian disappeared again. Not far away, Wu Chuan's expression was extremely ferocious as he scanned the surroundings. Yi Xian, do you dare? Right at this moment, a blood-red prisoner character suddenly appeared above Wu Chuan. At the same time, a strand of sword light appeared in front of him. At this moment, Wu Chuan's heart skipped a beat. 6 Paths of Truth. You. As he spoke, he suddenly circulated the mystic qi in his body, and was about to make a move. But right at this moment, another mysterious force pressed down on his body. Sword domain. Wu Chuan was horrified. He suddenly roared, "Essence return!" Boom! His body exploded right away. A gust of strong energy swept across the field like a storm. Yi Xian, who was in front of him, kept retreating. At this critical moment, Wu Chuan directly abandoned his physical body, because he knew that if he didn't abandon his physical body, he would undoubtedly die. After Wu Chuan stopped, only his soul was left. In the distance, the sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly changed into the soul-suppressing sword. Be careful! From afar, Chen Tian's voice suddenly sounded. Just as Chen Tian's voice fell, The soul-suppressing sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly appeared above Wu Chuan's head. Wu Chuan's face changed drastically, and he was about to retreat. At this moment, the soul-suppressing sword turned into a ray of black light and sank into Wu Chuan's head. Bang! Wu Chuan's soul was directly absorbed by Yi Xian's soul-suppressing sword. Meanwhile, Yi Xian opened his right hand, and the executing heaven sword appeared in his grasp. In the next moment, a ray of sword light flashed. In the distance, the head of a student from the martial arts pavilion flew into the air. Instant kill. After Wu Chuan perished, no one could stop Yi Xian. In just a short moment, the remaining students of the martial arts pavilion had been slaughtered by Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Xiaoqi, who was nearby, suddenly retreated while blood sprayed out of her mouth. Chen Tian wanted to continue attacking, but Shen Xinghe and the others suddenly stood in front of Xiaoqi. Shen Xinghe looked at Chen Tian and smiled. "Mannerhead Chen, calm down." Chen Tian glared at Shen Xinghe and said, "Shen Xinghe, Fu Wenzong, you Fu Wenzong, will pay the price for what you did today." Shen Xinghe shook his head and said, "Mannerhead Chen, I Fu Wenzong, have always been kind to others. It was your myriad-wide academy who risked their lives to go against us. We were also helpless." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian in the distance and said, "Sai, little martial ancestor, you are really something. Why did you kill everyone else? As the saying goes, one should leave a way out for others to meet in the future. No matter what, you should at least leave someone alive." Yi Xian said with a straight face, "It's my fault. Next time, I will definitely leave someone alive for the worldwide academy." Shen Xinghe nodded and looked at Chen Tian. "Mannerhead Chen, don't be angry. Next time, we will definitely leave someone alive for you." Chen Tian glanced at Shen Xinghe and Chen Tian and said with a smile, "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian and said, "I'd like to see how much of a monster you are." As he finished speaking, he turned around and left. At the side, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. His right hand gripped the executing heaven sword tightly, as if he was about to make a move. At this time, Shen Xinghe suddenly said, "We won't be able to stop him." Lian Qian also said, "For an expert like Chen Tian, if he wants to leave, you people won't be able to stop him. Don't waste your energy." Yi Xian fell silent. He was a little unwilling because he knew that now that Chen Tian was alone, it was the best time to kill him. However, he also knew that if an expert like Chen Tian wanted to leave, they really wouldn't be able to stop him. Yi Xian shook his head and gathered his thoughts. With a wave of his right hand, the nearby soul-suppressing sword flew into his hand. At this time, Soul's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. "Young lord, this soul is so nourishing." Yi Xian said, "Are you going to evolve?" Soul said excitedly, "It should be soon. If I still have such a powerful soul, I should be able to become even stronger." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Very good." It could be said that the current soul-suppressing sword was even stronger than it was at its peak, because it had been constantly devouring powerful souls. And every time it devoured a powerful soul, it was able to greatly improve. At this time, Soul said again, "Young lord, I can nourish your soul now and make it even stronger." Yi Xian was a little curious. "Nourish my soul? What does that mean?" Soul smiled and said, "It means that I'm using myself to nourish your soul. This way, your soul can become even stronger. In the future, you'll have a great advantage when you fight powerhouses who are good at soul attacks. Or perhaps, you'll become even more powerful when you perform soul-related divine abilities and sword techniques." Yi Xian nodded. He was looking forward to Soul's evolution now. He had to admit that with Soul's help, he could be said to be a powerhouse who was a natural counter to Souls. At this moment, Shen Xinghe suddenly said, "Let's go back." Go back. However, Yi Xian shook his head. "Old Shen, both of you should go back. I want to take a stroll." Old Shen immediately shook his head. "No, you're definitely going to do something bad." Yi Xian was speechless. What was he talking about? Old Shen said in a deep voice, "Little Grand Master, you're now the most important person to me, Fu Wenzong. You can't take any risks. If anything happens to you, how are we going to explain it to the patriarch?" Yi Xian hesitated for a moment. Just when he was about to speak, Lu Yong suddenly said. Senior brother, let him go. Shen Xinghe looked at Lu Yuan. You, Lu Yong said softly. Little Grand Master isn't a flower in a greenhouse. And we can't let him become one. We might be harming him by protecting him like this. Shen Xinghe wanted to say something, but Lu Yong said, trust him. With Little Grand Master's strength and strange movement technique, even a powerhouse like Chen Tian can't do anything to him if he wants to escape. Shen Xinghe fell silent for a moment before he nodded. He looked at Yi Xian and said, you have to be careful when you're outside. Yi Xian smiled. I'll be careful. Shen Xinghe suddenly pointed with his finger, and a 7-colored talisman suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. This is a world breaker talisman left behind by the patriarch all those years ago. This talisman contains an extremely powerful force, and it's too powerful for you to endure right now. Fortunately, your body is strong enough, so as long as you don't overuse this talisman, it won't be a big problem. Yi Xian was about to speak when Shen Xinghe pointed with his finger again, and a white jade bottle appeared in front of him. This is the blood of the Heavenly Dragon Clan's Dragon Emperor. The Heavenly Dragon Clan's dragon ancestor gave it to the Patriarch all those years ago. The Patriarch didn't use it, so he kept it. However, there aren't many. There are only 3 drops left. Heavenly Dragon Clan. Yi Xian was slightly curious. Old Shun, what's the use of this blood? Lu Yong smiled and said, this is a great treasure. If you devour a drop of dragon blood, then you'll obtain the invincible strength of the Heavenly Dragon Clan. Simply speaking, devouring a drop of dragon blood can allow the young martial ancestor's current strength to increase by at least 10 times. 10 times. Yi Xian's expression instantly became solemn when he heard this. His current body wasn't weak at all, and if it was 10 times stronger, then he would be entirely capable of using his body to go head-on against Chen Tian. Meanwhile, Lu Yong said, not only can it increase the strength of your body, it can even strengthen your physical defenses. It can be said that the Heavenly Dragon ancestral blood is a priceless treasure in this era. Yi Xian didn't refuse. He put the 3 drops of Heavenly Dragon ancestral blood away, and then he bowed slightly to Elder Shun. Thank you, Elder Shun. Elder Shun flicked his finger again, and a spatial ring descended before Yi Xian. There are 1,000 crystals in this spatial ring. Keep them and spend them. Besides that, there's a top-grade orange talisman in there. It's a spatial teleportation talisman. You can activate this talisman if you encounter danger, and it can instantly teleport you back to Fuwenzong. However, you can't be careless. Some extraordinary experts are capable of cutting off your teleportation at will. Yi Xian nodded. Understood. Shen Xinghe walked over to Yi Xian and patted Yi Xian on the shoulder lightly. Contact us if you have any problems or difficulties. Our Fuwenzong doesn't have much, but we have a lot of money. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 881. At this moment, Yi Xian felt warm in his heart. He didn't reject it and kept the treasures. Yi Xian cupped his fists at Shen Xinghe. Thank you, Old Shun. Old Shun smiled. We're on the same side. There's no need to be so polite. Yi Xian smiled. I'll bid farewell to my friends. Shen Xinghe nodded. Go. Yi Xian walked towards Xiaoqi and the rest. Shen Xinghe said softly, I Fuwenzong am very lucky. Lu Yong, who was beside Shen Xinghe, smiled. Senior brother, aren't you afraid that he will bring disaster to me, Fuwenzong? Shen Xinghe said softly. He wants to get benefits but doesn't want to contribute. How can there be such a good thing in this world? Lu Yong nodded. I've secretly investigated him. This person isn't an ungrateful person. If I, Fuwenzong, treat him well, he will treat me well. As he spoke, he looked at Xiaoqi and the rest. I didn't expect these 3 girls to be so monstrous. This time I, Fuwenzong, have really made a killing. Shen Xinghe nodded and smiled. You've made a killing. As he said this, he seemed to have thought of something. His expression turned serious. You must be careful of the Worldwide Academy. Remember, let our people secretly protect them. Lu Yong nodded. Understood. What were geniuses most afraid of? Premature death. One could imagine that many years later, if Yi Xian and the rest didn't die, Fu Wenzhong would definitely become a superpower in the fifth dimension. Especially Yi Xian. Yi Xian had the highest chance of drawing the seven-colored talisman. Therefore, Fu Wenzhong was most worried about Yi Xian and the rest. In the distance, Yi Xian walked towards Xiaoqi and the rest. He looked at them and pointed his finger. 3 white jade bottles landed in front of the 3 girls. Spring of life. Lian Wanli grabbed a white jade bottle. She glanced at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "How interesting." Yi Xian smiled and looked at 7. "Are you okay?" Xiaoqi shook his head. "It's fine." Yi Xian nodded. "Right, where's Emosia?" Xiaoqi said. "Emosia is about to break through, so we came first." He had to break through. Yi Xian smiled and said, "It's a good thing." 7 looked at Yi Xian. "How is Fu Wenzhong?" Yi Xian nodded. "Very good." Xiaoqi nodded. "Then we'll stay in Fu Wenzhong for the time being." Yi Xian said. "The 3 of you can cultivate in Fu Wenzhong. Fu Wenzhong doesn't have much, but it has money. If you need anything, you can look for old Shun. With his help, I believe your strength will increase greatly." The 3 of them weren't weaker than him in terms of talent. What they lacked was resources. Once they had resources, the 3 of them would definitely soar. Lian Wanli suddenly asked, "Where are you going?" Yi Xian smiled. "I'm going to walk around and look for opportunities." Lian Wanli looked at Yi Xian. "I'll go with you." Yi Xian was stunned. Lian Wanli's brows raised. "No." Yi Xian hesitated and was about to speak when Lian Wanli said, "Are you afraid that I'll drag you down?" Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "Of course not." Lian Wanli said calmly. "Then why are you hesitating? Are you afraid that I will eat you?" Yi Xian smiled. "If you want to go, then let's go together." Lian Wanli nodded. She seemed to have thought of something and looked at Enlancio. "You don't mind, right?" Enlancio shook her head. Lian Wanli smiled. "Don't worry, I won't eat him." Enlancio said softly, "Be careful." A moment later, Yi Xian and Lian Wanli left. 7 and Enlancio followed Shen Xinghe, and the others back to Fu Wenzhong. Fu Wenzhong placed a lot of importance on 7 and Enlancio because their combat strength was too high. Although they didn't know Talisman Dao, they knew how to fight. What Fu Wenzhong lacked the most now was people who could fight. Thus, Fu Wenzhong was very happy about 7 and Enlancio's arrival. Somewhere in the clouds, Yi Xian rode on his sword, and beside him was Lian Wanli. Actually, he didn't understand why Lian Wanli followed him. He knew that she definitely wasn't here to play. At this moment, Lian Wanli suddenly said, "Do you still remember Qingzhou?" "Qingzhou." Yi Xian nodded. "I remember." How could he not remember that place? He and his sister Yiling came from that place. Of course, the place that left the deepest impression was Qingcheng, country of Jiang, Old Ji. Yi Xian looked at Lian Wanli. "Why are you suddenly asking this?" Lian Wanli smiled. "Because we haven't gone back for a long time." "Go back." Yi Xian was silent. Lian Wanli tilted his head and looked at Yi Xian. "Have you thought about going back?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes. Over there, there's still someone I miss." Lian Wanli said softly. "Her?" Yi Xian nodded. Lian Wanli smiled. "I thought you forgot about her." Yi Xian shook his head. "No." Lian Wanli nodded. "When are you going back?" Yi Xian looked at Lian Wanli. "You really want to go back?" Lian Wanli nodded. "The further I am from home, the more I miss it." "Home?" Yi Xian shook his head. To him, that place was no longer home. Because Yi Ling was no longer in Qingcheng. Moreover, Enlancio, Lian Wanli, and the others were all here. So there was only one person in that place that he was reluctant to part with. Lian Wanli suddenly smiled. "No matter what, let's go back after some time. How about it? With our current strength, it won't take long to go back there." Yi Xian thought about it then nodded. "All right. Let's go back together." Lian Wanli's lips curled up. "It's settled." Yi Xian nodded. "It's settled." Saying that, he looked at Lian Wanli. "You followed me out to talk about this?" Lian Wanli smiled. "Not really. I really want to follow you around and see if I can bask in your light and obtain some opportunities." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Lian Wanli asked, "Where do you plan to go?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Ruins of a reason." This time, His target was the ruins of the founder of the limitless sword. In the past, the prophet had gone to the ruins, but the prophet's vision was too high, and he only fancied the limitless sword, so he decided to take a look. Perhaps there would be a new harvest. To put it bluntly, it was to pick up scraps. Yi Xian asked in his heart, "Miss Lian Qian, how far are we from the ruins?" Lian Qian said, "Walk in this direction, there's still half a day left." Yi Xian frowned. "With my speed I still need half a day?" Lian Qian said, "Yes, that place is a bit far, and it's very dangerous." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Dangerous? What do you mean?" Lian Qian said, "You'll know when the time comes." Yi Xian nodded. "No matter what, I have to go and take a look." Saying this, he seemed to have thought of something and asked, "Miss Lian Qian, from the looks of it, the strength of this Myriad Dimension Academy is quite strong." Lian Qian sneered, "Ignorant." Yi Xian was speechless. Lian Qian said in a low voice, "Let me tell you, don't ever look down on the Myriad Dimension Academy." Yi Xian said, "What do you mean?" Lian Qian said, "Let me tell you about the Worldwide Academy. After Master disappeared, the strongest person in the Worldwide Academy should be that female teacher. If she wants to kill you, let me tell you, unless that plainly dressed woman comes, no one can protect you. Even if Fu Wenzong gathers the strength of the entire academy, he won't be able to stop her." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "That female teacher is that strong?" Lian Qian said, "Very strong. Back then, she was already unfathomable. Now she must be even stronger. Apart from her, the academy has 6 headmasters. These 6 were the strongest people in the academy, excluding the female teacher. Back then, the 6 of them were already at the peak of the heavenly fate realm. Now with their talent and strength, they should have reached the karma realm. However, I don't know if these 6 people are still in the academy." Speaking up to this point, she paused and then continued. "Also, the Worldwide Academy has a great formation. It was left behind by the teacher in the past. This formation is called human slaying. The teacher said that there are no gods in the world, only powerful people. If the Worldwide Academy is in danger in the future, it must be the work of humans. Therefore, the teacher personally studied this great formation. Once this formation is activated, it can slay anyone. This is why even though the Worldwide Academy has declined, no one dares to enter the Myriad Dimension Library. Because in this world, it is possible that no one can block this slash." Yi Xian suddenly said, "What about the plainly dressed woman?" Boom! A powerful force suddenly blasted Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian was directly sent flying. Lian Wanli, who was standing at the side, blinked her eyes in a daze. In the distance, Yi Xian said with some grievance, "Miss Lian Qian, what are you doing?" "The one who attacked just now was naturally Lian Qian." Lian Qian said coldly, "How can you be so stubborn?" Yi Xian was speechless. Lian Qian said softly, "I'm not joking with you. You must not underestimate the Myriad Dimension Academy. Besides the female teacher and the 6 great sect seniors that I told you about earlier, the Myriad Dimension Academy still has many formidable methods, especially those powerful students and teachers. Most of them left the academy after the master disappeared. However, if the Worldwide Academy is in danger, I can guarantee that these people will definitely appear, including that female teacher." Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. "Why?" Lian Qian said, "Because this is the academy left behind by the master. It can decline, it can destroy itself, but it cannot be destroyed by outsiders." Yi Xian was silent. Lian Qian said again, "Even I don't want the Myriad Dimension Academy to be destroyed. If you have the ability in the future, just kill that Chen Tian and the other leaders." Yi Xian smiled. "Miss Lian Qian, it's them who want to destroy me." After a moment of silence, Lian Qian said softly, "Since you obtained this pagoda, you can also be considered as the master's successor. Therefore, I hope that you can protect the academy he left behind. Of course, I won't force you." Yi Xian smiled. "Let's not talk about this troublesome issue," Lian Qian said. "All right, we'll talk about the future in the future." Yi Xian started to speed up. Meanwhile, in the faraway Myriad Dimension Academy, Chen Tian was sitting in the study. He had been sitting here for a full 4 hours. At this time, an old man suddenly walked into the study. Chen Tian looked at the old man. How is it? The old man said in a deep voice. He is willing to personally kill Yi Xian. However, he said that this is not for you, but for the future of the academy. Chen Tian was silent. The old man said again. He has already gone to find that Yi Xian. Since he agreed to personally take action, there shouldn't be any problems. P.S. Sorry, the update is over. There's no reason, no excuse, I overslept. I bow to everyone. Sorry. Chapter 882. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian and Lian Wanli arrived at a mountain range. Instead of flying, they walked on foot, deep in the mountains and ancient forests. That was what Yi Xian was feeling at the moment. Around him and Lian Wanli, ancient trees towered into the sky. The top of their heads was covered by countless leaves, preventing even the slightest bit of sunlight from entering. Around them, weeds were several zhang tall and densely packed, bringing with them a heavy sense of oppression. Lian Wanli said softly, "This place has grown wild for who knows how long." Yi Xian nodded. He glanced around and said softly, "Be careful." One look, and you could tell that this place wasn't a good place. Lian Wanli nodded slightly, and the two continued forward. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Miss Lian Qian, how much longer do we need?" Lian Qian said, 2 hours. Yi Xian's expression froze. He smiled bitterly and said, "Why don't we just use sword kinesis flight?" Lian Qian said softly, "Respect." Yi Xian was silent. Lian Qian continued. When Master came here, he also advanced on foot to show his respect. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Miss Lian Qian, as far as I know, your master was already invincible in the world, right?" Lian Qian said, "You can say that." Yi Xian was about to say something, but Lian Qian said, "I know what you mean. Master didn't only respect the strong, he respected everyone. He said that every life should be respected, and in Master's opinion, the strong shouldn't be measured by strength alone." Yi Xian asked, "Then what else should be measured by?" Lian Qian said softly, "Reason." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Lian Qian said, "If a strong person is willing to reason with someone weaker than him, then he is a strong person." Yi Xian shook his head. In his impression, there were very few people who talked reason. Everyone talked about their fists, and whoever had the bigger fists was the one who was reasonable. As if she knew what Yi Xian was thinking, Lian Qian continued, "That's why Master said that this world is a sick one. People only believed in strength. They only believed in absolute strength, because with strength, they could do whatever they wanted. Of course, Master didn't say that this is wrong. He said that this is the rule of this world, because the weak will be bullied, and once a person is bullied, they will want to become stronger, and then the whole world will continue this vicious cycle." When she spoke up to hear, she paused for a moment and said, "Master said that he wanted to create an equal world, a world that didn't rely on strength." Yi Xian quickly asked, "And then?" Lian Qian said, "He left the world for a period of time. During that time, he went to do this." Yi Xian asked again, "Did you succeed?" Lian Qian said, "I don't know. I only know that when he came back, he told us that no matter what kind of world it was impossible to be absolutely fair. He said that he sealed the world's spiritual energy, so there were no world-destroying powerhouses in that world, and the average lifespan was less than 100 years. But even so, there were fights in that world, and the fights were very fierce. In the end, he understood one thing, and that is that people will never be satisfied. Not only people, but all living things are the same. They will never be satisfied. Moreover, as a person's strength gradually grows, his ambition will also grow." Yi Xian was silent. At this time, Lian Qian suddenly said, "Are you willing to reason with people who are weaker than you?" Himself. Yi Xian smiled. "If people don't bully me, I won't bully them. If people bully me, I will kill them." Lian Qian said softly, "That's enough." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Miss Lian Qian, I think your master might want to change the world." Lian Qian smiled. "He didn't want to, he has already done it." Therefore, he founded the Worldwide Academy. Unfortunately, after he disappeared, the current Worldwide Academy has slowly deteriorated. Yi Xian nodded and was about to speak, when Lian Wanli suddenly said, "Look ahead." Yi Xian looked up. Not far in front of his door was a row of ancient trees, and this row of ancient trees directly blocked their path. Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Miss Lian Qian, what is this?" Lian Qian said in a low voice. "Let's go." Yi Xian nodded. He pointed with his finger. An array of sword light cut through the air. The ancient tree in the distance was directly cut down, and behind the ancient tree, there were weeds everywhere, and behind the weeds, a stone door could be faintly seen. Yi Xian said softly, "Have we arrived?" Lian Qian said, "We have." Yi Xian and Lian Wanli walked in front of the stone door, and just as he was about to attack, he seemed to have thought of something. He bowed slightly, and then put his finger together and lightly drew a line. Chi. The weeds were cut to pieces by the sword light, and behind the weeds was a stone door covered in runes. Yi Xian was about to attack, but at this time Lian Qian suddenly said, "Do you want to die?" Yi Xian was a bit puzzled. "What do you mean, Miss Lian Qian?" Lian Qian said, "This is a seal that I borrowed Master's strength in the past. If you attack forcefully, the rebound force will directly kill you." Yi Xian smiled awkwardly. "Then I'll have to ask Miss Lian Qian to attack." At this time, Lian Qian suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. She glanced at Yi Xian, then looked at the stone door. She opened her palm, and silently muttered some terms that Yi Xian didn't understand. A moment later, the stone door in the distance suddenly became illusory, and after a dozen breaths, the stone door disappeared. Lian Qian looked at Yi Xian. "Let's go." As soon as she finished speaking, she transformed into a ray of white light and vanished. Yi Xian nodded and walked through the stone door with Lian Qianli. After passing through the stone door, there was only darkness, and an oppressive feeling assaulted their faces. Yi Xian opened his palm, and a moonstone flew out. But at this moment, a ray of sword light suddenly slashed the moonstone. Bang! The moonstone directly exploded. Yi Xian frowned slightly. "This is," Lian Qian said, "the sword spirit of this place. There was a sword here in the past, the blind swordsman's sword, and the sword spirit has always been guarding this place. Master wanted to take it away, but it was unwilling. You have to be careful. The sword spirit of this sword is extremely powerful, and you can't underestimate it." Yi Xian nodded, and he glanced at the surroundings before walking towards the depths of the cave. At this moment, a ray of sword light suddenly cut through the air in front of him. Yi Xian blocked it with his sword. Bang! A powerful force instantly blasted Yi Xian out of the cave, and Lian Qianli was also blasted out together with him. Outside the cave, Yi Xian frowned slightly. Was this sword really that powerful? Without thinking too much, Yi Xian was about to make a move when Lian Qian suddenly appeared in front of the cave. She looked into the cave and asked, "Do you still remember me?" At this moment, the faint sound of a sword humming came from inside the cave. Lian Qian turned to look at Yi Xian. "Let's go." After saying that, she led Yi Xian and Lian Qianli into the cave. The cave was still pitch black, but after walking for about 15 minutes, the three of them heard the gurgling sound of a stream. Yi Xian looked into the distance. There was an exit in the distance, and from this exit, he saw a waterfall. After exiting the cave, their field of vision suddenly widened. In front of them was a small waterfall, and below the waterfall was a pool of water. All around them was a sea of flowers. Yi Xian looked at the bottom of the waterfall. On the pool of water, there was a middle-aged man with his eyes covered by a black cloth. The middle-aged man was dressed very simply, in simple cotton clothes. From his appearance, there was nothing special about him, and he looked no different from an ordinary person. At this moment, Yi Xian and Lian Qianli suddenly turned their heads to look. Not far away, from the flowering shrubs on the right, a woman wearing a cotton dress walked out. The woman held a bouquet of flowers in her hand, and her body emitted a domineering aura. Sword spirit. After this woman came out, she looked at Lian Qian and said, "Long time no see." Lian Qian nodded. "Yes, it has been a long time." The woman walked to the side of the pool, and placed the bouquet of flowers in her hand into the pool. Then she asked softly, "Where is your master?" Lian Qian shook her head. "He disappeared." The woman frowned and looked at Lian Qian. "In this world no one can kill him." Lian Qian said softly, "He disappeared. But he wasn't killed by anyone. As for where he went, even I don't know. It's like he evaporated into thin air." The woman fell silent for a moment before she said, "He's a very extraordinary person." Lian Qian smiled and said, "Your master is very powerful as well." The woman looked at the middle-aged man in the middle of the pool and said softly, "During Master's era, after Master became famous, he had never tasted defeat. But if you compare him to your master, he's still lacking. Your master is the strongest person I've ever met." Lian Qian shook her head. "He was." The woman turned to look at Lian Qian and asked, "What do you mean?" Lian Qian said softly, "I met a very strong woman in the fourth dimension, so strong that she's unreasonable." The woman frowned slightly. "Stronger than your master?" Lian Qian said in a low voice, "I don't know. I only know that if she fought Master might not be able to defeat her. Right, she's also a swordsman." "Swordsman?" The woman's brows raised slightly when she heard Lian Qian. "She's a swordsman?" Lian Qian nodded. "Yes." The woman looked straight at Lian Qian. "You mean she's stronger than my master?" Lian Qian glanced at the middle-aged man in the pool not far away. "Your master is the strongest swordsman I've ever met in the fifth dimension. But that woman should be stronger than your master." "Ridiculous." The woman's expression suddenly became cold. "If you say that your master is stronger than my master, I'll admit it. But I don't believe that there's a swordsman in this world who's stronger than my master in the way of the sword. Absolutely impossible." Lian Qian shook her head. "You should go out and take a look." She knew that the master of the sword spirit in front of her was very strong. How could a person who could create the infinite sword not be strong? But that woman was even stronger. That woman was so strong that she was unreasonable. At this time, the woman not far away suddenly said in a cold voice, "In my heart, all the swordsmen in this world added together can't even compare to a single hair on my master's head." At this time, the sound of a sword suddenly rang out from within Yi Xian's body. The next moment, the sword of the plain-dressed woman suddenly flew out. Its speed was extremely fast, and like a sudden clap of thunder, it instantly slashed towards the woman. At this time, the female sword spirit suddenly stood up, her eyes as cold as ice. "Impudent." As her voice fell, a powerful sword force erupted from her body. Chapter 883. The female sword spirit's face instantly turned as cold as ice when she saw that the sword was targeting her. Powerful sword aura swept out from her body, but as the sword slashed over, her sword aura instantly vanished into thin air. The female sword spirit's expression instantly changed when she witnessed this scene. However, she didn't shrink back. She stomped her right foot on the ground and transformed into a ray of light that shot forward explosively. Under the gazes of Yi Xian's group of three, the two swords slashed against each other. They were evenly matched. Bang! A ray of light flew out. It was the female sword spirit who flew out. After the female sword spirit stopped moving in the distance, her figure instantly became ethereal. That attack had almost destroyed her spirit. Meanwhile, the woman's sword suddenly trembled violently, and a sword howl reverberated through the sky. Yi Xian was able to sense that the sword was looking down upon him. It wasn't just looking down upon the female sword spirit, it was looking down upon everything and the world. It was filled with invincible confidence. Just like the woman in a plain dress, Lian Qian took a deep and long glance at the sword that floated in the distance, and there was a trace of fear in her eyes. At this moment, she knew that she'd underestimated the woman in a plain dress. Because the strength of the sword was too heaven-defying. The sword was strong because of its master. The sword was as strong as the woman in a plain dress was. This was the mortal realm. The sword was extraordinary because of its master. Meanwhile, the woman's sword suddenly transformed into a ray of light that entered Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian gazed at the female sword spirit, and the latter's gaze was slightly dazed. She'd lost. Moreover, she'd lost so easily that she didn't even have the strength to fight back. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, Young miss. The sword spirit gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. I've always felt that one has to experience failure to grow. If a person continues to be invincible, then that person will never know what he's lacking. So long as he fails once, then that person will notice that he has many flaws and inadequacies. Only those who have experienced failure will become stronger. Failure? Yi Xian was never afraid of failure. What he was afraid of was not having a chance to start over after failure. Therefore, some failures were acceptable, but some failures were absolutely unacceptable. For some failures, you could start all over again. But for some failures, you would never have the chance to make a comeback. The sword spirit looked at Yi Xian. Are you a swordsman? Yi Xian nodded. Meanwhile, Lian Qian spoke abruptly. Miss Sword Spirit, I've come this time because I want him to inherit your master's inheritance in the sword Dao. The sword spirit looked at Yi Xian again. After a while, she shook her head. Too weak. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression changed abruptly, and he looked into the distance. At the end of his vision, a sword was floating in the air, 1,000 miles away. At this moment, Yi Xian's expression became extremely solemn. The woman spoke again. Actually, you haven't brought out the full power of your boundless sword because you lack the core cultivation technique. This boundless sword can only be unleashed to its greatest extent by using the heart sword mental cultivation method. Yi Xian spoke solemnly. You mean that this boundless sword is a flying sword? The woman nodded. It is. This boundless sword has another name, 1,000 miles away. It can instantly kill everything within 1,000 miles. 1,000 miles. Yi Xian fell silent. This isn't 3 kilometers, it's 1,000 miles. Meanwhile, the woman spoke again. Master, besides this boundless sword, there's another sword technique. No, it can't be called a sword technique. It's a form of the sword Dao. Yi Xian was very curious. What form? The woman spoke softly. Sword rule. The so-called sword rule is the heavy sword and the light sword. The light sword focuses on speed, and only speed can't defeat all martial techniques in the world. So the form of the light sword has to be fast, so fast that the enemy can't defend against it. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, what about the heavy sword? The woman said, the heavy sword focuses on using one's strength to overcome 10 techniques. Under one sword, all techniques can be broken. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. When Master's body recovered, he could freely switch between the light sword and the heavy sword. At that time, no one was his opponent. Heavy sword. Light sword. Yi Xian fell silent. He had already seen the power of the light sword. This boundless sword, its power naturally went without saying. If the light sword was so powerful, would the heavy sword be weak? What if the light sword and heavy sword were combined? Wouldn't that be heaven-defying? At this time, Lian Wanli suddenly asked, isn't there another cultivation method? The woman nodded. Master also created a cultivation method, the soul. The soul doesn't rely on the body, but on the soul. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. Master's strongest back then wasn't the light sword or heavy sword, but the light sword, heavy sword and the soul form. As she spoke, her right hand suddenly pressed on Yi Xian's shoulder. In the next moment, Yi Xian's soul was directly pulled out by her. The woman said, try the boundless sword. Yi Xian hesitated, then asked, soul? The woman nodded. Yi Xian nodded. He opened his palm, and the heaven-punishing sword appeared in his hand. Although he was a soul form, he could still use sword techniques. Of course, it wasn't that powerful. Yi Xian swung his sword, and the sky thousands of feet away suddenly split open. Boundless sword. Its power was at least half of the original. Yi Xian's soul returned to his body, and he said in a deep voice, Miss Sword Spirit, I feel that my body is a little stronger. Moreover, although the soul can use sword techniques, but besides being slightly faster, it's meaningless. The woman looked at Yi Xian. That's because you haven't seen the power of the soul. Yi Xian said, Miss, please demonstrate. The woman glanced at Yi Xian. Do I have a soul? Yi Xian, the woman said softly. Do you know the power and uniqueness of the soul? Yi Xian bowed slightly. Miss, please show me. The woman said, when the soul leaves the body, Although it doesn't have the support of the body, it also doesn't have the shackles of the body. To put it bluntly, there were 3 benefits to having a soul. First, it was light. Your soul would be as light as a feather in this world. Under such circumstances, no matter what sword technique you used, even if you didn't have the support of your physical body, you would still be able to become faster. Your boundless sword just now can actually be faster. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. What's the second benefit? The woman said, soul power. The soul has the power of the soul, which is also soul power. Your soul power and body are very strong. If you fuse Master's sword rule with this soul power, it will become very powerful. The biggest benefit of the soul is that you can cultivate the power of yin and yang. The soul is yang, and the body is yin. Only the soul can absorb the power of yin and yang, and the power of yin and yang can make your sword stronger. Simply put, even if the world is without spirit energy, it won't affect you because you cultivate the power of yin and yang, and the power of yin and yang is contained in your soul, so you can use it with your body. Yi Xian understood when he heard this. The soul was a different way of cultivation, a new way of cultivation that left the body, and it was a little similar to his invincible sword body. Even the cultivation methods were different. Meanwhile, the woman said, start with the sword rule. I'll teach you the mental cultivation method now. As for how far you can cultivate it, it'll depend on your own ability. As soon as she finished speaking, she pointed with her fingers, and a white light suddenly entered Yi Xian's mind. In next to no time, some information appeared in Yi Xian's mind. Heart sword mental cultivation method, and sword soul mental cultivation method. As if he had obtained a treasure, Yi Xian started to absorb it crazily. In the following time, Yi Xian started to cultivate the sword rule. He started with the light sword, which was the immeasurable sword. Flying sword. After adding the heart sword mental cultivation method, Yi Xian realized that the speed of the immeasurable sword was at least a few times faster than before. The real flying sword could take a person's head from 1,000 miles away. In a courtyard somewhere in the Worldwide Academy, a middle-aged man suddenly stood up. He was the strategist who had gone to the 4-dimensional universe, and he was in charge of looking for Yi Ling. The strategist looked at the old man, who suddenly appeared in front of him. Still no news about Yi Ling? The old man shook his head. There's no news about the 4-dimensional universe. The strategist said in a deep voice. What about the 5-dimensional universe? The old man said. Our people have already gone out to look for him. Not only that, I've also asked the strategist sect for help. The strategist sect. The strategist nodded slightly. With their help, it should be easy to find Yi Ling. The old man nodded. They said they already have some clues. Let's get ready to capture him. The strategist immediately said, let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, the two of them disappeared from the scene. P.S. I've already bought a small motorcycle. I'm going to replace it with 4 wheels in 2 years. I have a 2-story old house. The decoration is average, but it's livable. With a car and a house, I feel that there's nothing more to pursue in life. I have a weak question. At my age, this is already considered amazing, right? Chapter 884. Yi Ling. The Worldwide Academy had never given up looking for Yi Ling, because they knew that Yi Ling was the person Yi Xian cared about the most. If they could find Yi Ling, they would be able to control Yi Xian. Unfortunately, their people had been searching for a long time in the 4th dimension, but there was no news. Therefore, they decided to search in the 5th dimension. However, the intelligence of the Worldwide Academy had never been good. Therefore, they found the strategist sect. The position of the strategist sect in the 5th dimension was a bit special. This special was not because of their strength, but because of their intelligence. It could be said that other than the top forces, the strategist sect's intelligence was the strongest. The strategist sect was also smart. They never participated in any power struggles. They only did intelligence. Anyone, any force, as long as they paid them, they would let you know what you wanted to know. The strategist sect. The strategist sect was located on the strategist mountain. This mountain was 90,000 feet high, and the sect was in the middle of a sea of clouds. Standing there, It was like being in a fairyland. At this moment, above the strategist sect, an old man was spinning a wheel, his mouth constantly muttering something. This person was the sect master of the strategist sect, Xiantiance. Next to Xiantiance, there was an old man. This person was the great elder of the strategist sect, Chunchinian. After a while, Xiantiance suddenly stopped, and the wheel in front of him trembled slightly. At the same time, a light screen appeared not far from him, but it was blurry. Chunchinian looked at Xiantiance. Senior brother? Xiantiance said softly. It will appear soon. Chunchinian said in a deep voice. Senior brother, as far as I know, Yi Xian values his sister Yi Ling. If we find his sister for the Worldwide Academy, I'm afraid. You also know that he has Fu Wenzong behind him. Fu Wenzong? Xiantiance nodded. Of course I know that he has Fu Wenzong behind him. But now that the Worldwide Academy and Fu Wenzong are at war, and we are so close to the Worldwide Academy, if we don't take sides, do you think the Worldwide Academy will let us go? Chunchinian said in a deep voice. We have never participated in worldly affairs, Xiantiance said. That was before. Now we have to participate. Of course, we don't have to get too involved. We're just providing information to the Worldwide Academy, aren't we? Chunchinian sighed softly, and did not say anything else. Xiantiance continued. Moreover, the Worldwide Academy's remuneration is not small. It would be a waste not to earn it. Chunchinian was about to speak, when the screen of light before them suddenly trembled. It didn't take long for a wasteland to appear on the screen of light. Seeing this wasteland, Xiantiance frowned slightly. Why does it look a bit familiar? At this time, the screen moved forward and soon came to a door. When they saw this door, Xiantiance and Chunchinian's expressions changed. It's the Azura Hell. Oh my god. After saying that, he was about to put away the roulette. At this moment, a little girl appeared on the screen. The little girl was wearing a short black dress, and her eyes were as black as the abyss. The little girl looked in front of her. You're looking for me? Hearing this, Xiantiance knelt down with a thud and said in a trembling voice, Empress, this is a misunderstanding. At this moment, an old man quietly appeared behind Xiantiance. Xiantiance's expression changed greatly, and he quickly kowtowed. Empress, spare me, spare me. This is what the Worldwide Academy told me to do. Empress, spare me. At this moment, Xiantiance's head was pounding like garlic. Chunchinian was also extremely shocked, and his whole body was trembling. Shura Empress. Among the 6 powerhouses in the world, this Shura Empress was the most powerful existence. In this woman's eyes, there were only the living and the dead. The old man behind Xiantiance was about to make a move, but at this moment, Yi Ling suddenly turned around, and the old man disappeared. The roulette in Xiantiance's hand directly exploded. At the same time, Xiantiance's eyes directly exploded and blood splashed. At this moment, the entire Xiantian sect began to collapse layer by layer. In less than a few breaths, the entire heavenly strategist sect turned into dust. However, Xiantiance was still alive, but he had lost his eyes and his cultivation. He had completely become a cripple. At this time, the strategist and the others arrived. When they saw this scene, the strategist and the others were stunned. A moment later, the strategist quickly appeared in front of Xiantiance. Old Xian, this is? Xiantiance knelt on the ground. He was silent for a long time. Finally, he got up and said softly, My heavenly strategist sect has offended a peerless powerhouse. The strategist frowned slightly. Peerless powerhouse? Who? Xiantiance shook his head. It doesn't matter. After saying that, he turned around and left. At this time, the strategist quickly said, Old Xian, that Yi Ling. Xiantiance stopped and sighed. I almost found her. Unfortunately. After saying that, he shook his head. I can be sure that she is in the 5th dimension. But where she is, the old man doesn't know. After saying that, he walked into the distance. In the same place, the strategist looked in the direction that Xiantiance left and said softly, This matter is a bit strange. Go and find out who did it just now. Behind him, a man quietly left. At this time, an old man said in a deep voice, That Yi Ling is in the 5th dimension. The strategist nodded. as long as she is in the fifth dimension. After saying that, he turned his head and looked in front of him. Now there was only a ruin in front of him. The strategist frowned slightly. Who has such powerful strength to be able to destroy this celestial strategist sect so easily? The old man nodded. To be able to destroy a sect so easily, it is definitely not an ordinary person or an ordinary force. I really don't know who this celestial strategist sect provoked to be completely destroyed. It is not an ordinary tragedy. The strategist shook his head. This matter will naturally be investigated. I will give you a task. Use all the intelligence of the academy to find this Yi Xian. Not only our people but also other sections. You must find this Yi Ling. The old man nodded and then turned around and left. The strategist slowly closed his eyes. Yi Ling. His goal was to find Yi Ling. Because Yi Xian had Fu Wenzong's protection, it was very difficult to kill Yi Xian. And Yi Ling was Yi Xian's flaw. Once this flaw was found, the Worldwide Academy could defeat Yi Xian in one blow. At this time, the strategist said again, find this Yi Ling at all costs. In the distance, Xian Tian stopped. He suddenly knelt on the ground and burst into tears. At this moment, he was crying like a child. In any case, the celestial strategist sect had been passed down for tens of thousands of years. Moreover, it was getting stronger and stronger. However, it was destroyed in his hands. As if thinking of something, Xian Tian suddenly raised his head and roared, Worldwide Academy. His voice was full of resentment. If it wasn't for the Worldwide Academy, the celestial strategist sect wouldn't have caused such a disaster. Find Yi Ling? Yi Xian's younger sister? Xian Tian suddenly roared again. Find your ancestor. Find your ancestor from the Worldwide Academy. After a while, Xian Tian gradually calmed down. At this moment, he suddenly thought of something. That was, he didn't find the wrong person. He was looking for Yi Ling. Then there was a problem. Why did he look for the Shura Empress? As if thinking of something, Xian Tian's face instantly changed. The Shura Empress is Yi Ling. In fact, he already had this idea from the beginning. However, at that time, he felt that it was ridiculous. Coupled with the sadness in his heart, he didn't think much about it. But now that he thought about it carefully, he realized that the Shura Empress was very likely to be Yi Ling. The Shura Empress was Yi Xian's younger sister? Xian Tian's scalp went numb as he thought about it. Yi Xian. After a while, Xian Tian slowly walked into the distance. His top priority now was to recover his body. Then he would go and seek refuge with Yi Xian. Naturally, he wanted to make a comeback. To make a comeback, he needed help. He couldn't count on the Worldwide Academy anymore. Now that his sect had been annihilated, he didn't have the slightest value to the academy. He could only look for someone else. And he decided to look for Yi Xian. Fu Wenzong. Fu Wenzong also received the news that the celestial strategist sect had been destroyed. Regarding this sudden incident, Fu Wenzong was also shocked. After all, although the celestial strategist sect wasn't that powerful, it wasn't that weak either. Who could have destroyed the celestial strategist sect without a sound? Inside the rune palace, Shen Xinghe was silent for a long time. Finally, he looked at Lu Yong beside him. Send someone to investigate and find out who did it. Lu Yong nodded. I've already sent someone to investigate, but I'm afraid there won't be any results. The other party was able to destroy the celestial strategist sect so easily. This kind of expert, if he doesn't want others to know, it will be very difficult for outsiders to find out. Shen Xinghe nodded slightly. Indeed. As he spoke, he stood up and looked into the distance. There was a trace of worry in his eyes. I wonder how the little grandmaster is doing. Yi Xian. They were very worried about Yi Xian. Although Yi Xian was strong enough, there were also crouching tigers and hidden dragons in the fifth dimension. At this moment, Lu Yong suddenly said, that Miss Xiaoqi seems to be about to break through. Break through. Shen Xinghe hurriedly said, let's go. After speaking, he left the rune palace with Lu Yong and the others. Protect Xiaoqi. Fu Wenzong attached great importance to Xiaoqi and in Lanxiu, because these two women's talent was too terrifying. It could be said that if Yi Xian didn't use those external objects, he might not be able to defeat these two women. Azura Hell. After Yi Ling destroyed the Celestial Strategist sect, she turned around and walked towards the door. At this moment, the two old men behind her suddenly knelt on one knee. One of them said fiercely, "Master, the Worldwide Academy actually issued a warrant for Master. They deserve to die. Master, please allow me to lead 300 Azura cavalry to trample the Worldwide Academy." Yi Ling stopped in her tracks. "No need." The old man was about to speak when Yi Ling turned her head and looked in the direction of the Worldwide Academy. "Aren't they looking for me? I'll go personally." After speaking, she suddenly disappeared. Chapter 885. Within the Worldwide Academy. Within the study, Chun Tian looked at the ancient book in his hands quietly. Every day, he would take some time out to read. This was what the Prophet had requested of them, and after so many years, he had gotten used to it. As though he thought of something, Chun Tian put down the book in his hands and looked ahead. "Is there any news of Yi Xian?" Where Chun Tian's gaze landed, an old man appeared like a specter. The old man wore a loose robe, his hands hidden in his sleeves, and he exuded a chilling aura. The old man shook his head. "There is no news of Chun Yiming at the moment. However, since he has agreed to appear, it should not be a problem." "Chun Yiming, one of the 6 headmasters of the Worldwide Academy," Chun Tian asked softly. "What about the other 5? The old man replied solemnly. "The other 5 did not respond to us. However, if there comes a day when the Academy faces a life-and-death situation, I believe that they and the headmaster will appear." Chun Tian shook his head and laughed. "Elder Yu Shuang, do you think that it's because I'm the Academy master that they are not returning?" The old man called Yu Shuang shook his head. "You have your reasons, but it is not entirely your fault. After teacher disappeared, most of them went to look for him. To them, the Academy with teacher is their academy. This is also the reason why they did not come out to fight for the position. However, some of them left because of you. After all, after you took over, everything you did was different from when teacher was still around." Chun Tian said in a light voice. "All those years ago, teacher established the Myriad Dimension Academy with the intention of enlightening all living beings. The Academy doesn't select people based on natural talent or background. So long as one is willing to learn, then anyone can enter my Myriad Dimension Academy. Even those students that represent a power are able to enter my Myriad Dimension Academy. But Sir didn't think that after these people finished their studies in the Worldwide Academy, they wouldn't be used by the Worldwide Academy at all." Yu Shuang said, "Although these people are not used by my Worldwide Academy, my Worldwide Academy still has students all over the 5 dimensions. Who would dare to bully my Worldwide Academy?" Chun Tian looked at Yu Shuang. "That is because teacher is here. With teacher around, the multidimensional universe has order. Who dares to bully my Worldwide Academy? But teacher is no longer here." Yu Shuang was silent. Actually, he also knew that when the Prophet was around, the Prophet could do whatever he wanted. Because the Prophet was powerful, no one dared to bully the Worldwide Academy. However, now that the Prophet had disappeared, there was no one in the Worldwide Academy who could control the 5-dimensional universe. Even if she was a female teacher, she could only protect the Worldwide Academy at most. It was impossible for her to manage other forces. Therefore, after the Prophet disappeared, many of the policies that he left behind could no longer be implemented. This was because the Worldwide Academy was no longer the leader. They would no longer listen to the Worldwide Academy. At this time Yu Shuang sighed. "Actually, it wasn't easy for you." At that time, the experts of the Worldwide Academy had all left and disappeared. When Chun Tian took over, he was only at the Yin-Yang realm. At that time, if not for the Prophet's influence, the Worldwide Academy would have been long gone. Although many forces were still afraid of the Worldwide Academy, in their hearts, they no longer revere this place. As if thinking of something, Yu Shuang said, "However, there is one thing that you did that was very unwise. It was that Yi Xian. Because of this person, many of our people have died." Chun Tian was silent. Yu Shuang continued, "Presently, my Myriad Dimension Academy has entered into conflict with the Talisman sect. It can be said that since we've been targeting Yi Xian, we haven't obtained the slightest benefit, and we've suffered incessant deaths instead. Furthermore, our worldwide academy has become like a secular power, fighting for power. This has gone against Mr.'s original intentions. AI. Chen Tian spoke softly. We have no way out. That Yi Xian has gained the recognition of the World Prism Pagoda. We are fated to fight to the death with him, unless we are willing to hand over the Universal Library to him. As for him, Qingqing, Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as the prince shall be removed, and Yi Lang shall take over. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? Right at this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look, and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and was Yi Xian's sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The girl called Yi Ling bowed to everyone in the ancestral hall, and asked timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Great Elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. This is a clan matter. What are you butting in for? Leave. Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the Great Elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. Impudent! The Great Elder suddenly raged. Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time, the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder replied coldly. Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered. Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of prince. What are you yelling about? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry, and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard quickly bowed. This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince. Yi Lang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the prince, I'll need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and quickly bowed deeply. This subordinate will go through fire and water for the prince, and I'll do anything for you. Yi Lang nodded. Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something, and he suddenly stopped. Inside the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside the hall. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The Great Elder narrowed his eyes, and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang, and was about to speak. At this moment, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there, and charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, Your man? As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, Prince, save me! Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu, and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides there were the elders of the Yi clan. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look, and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that Yi Xian was to be replaced, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the hall, and asked timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Great Elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. This is a matter of the clan. What are you interrupting for? Leave. Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the Great Elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. This is truly unfair. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. Whether or not he's crippled, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu, and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! Chapter 886. Yi Ling let go of Chen Tian, and looked to her right. A middle-aged man stood there. He wore a gray robe, held an ancient scroll in his left hand, and held a long brush in his right. He seemed extremely refined and quiet. The sect master of calligraphy, someone exclaimed with shock. The sect master of calligraphy's original name was Lin Xiaoshu, and he was one of the 6 original sect masters. He was a top-rate expert of the Worldwide Academy all those years ago. The members of the Worldwide Academy instantly heaved sighs of relief when they saw this person. The current Worldwide Academy wasn't the Worldwide Academy of all those years ago. Even if the Prophet hadn't been there all those years ago, the Shura Empress wouldn't have been able to act so wantonly in the Worldwide Academy. After all, besides the Prophet, there were also countless other experts. Unfortunately, the experts of the Myriad Dimension Academy that could make a move were very few, and it was utterly impossible for these few people to go against the Azura Empress. Fortunately, there was a headmaster who had come. Yi Ling gazed at Lin Xiaoshu, and the latter glanced at the surroundings before he chuckled. Empress, may I know how my worldwide academy has offended you to make you so angry? Yi Ling didn't say anything, and she just flicked her sleeve. Lin Xiaoshu suddenly tapped lightly with his brush in the air. Bang! An invisible wave suddenly rippled out in front of them. In the next moment, everyone watched as Lin Xiaoshu retreated repeatedly, and he only stopped after moving almost 3 kilometers back. However, the Shura Empress hadn't moved even half a step. The expressions of the countless experts of the Worldwide Academy instantly fell when they witnessed this scene. The sect master of calligraphy glanced at the brush in his hand, and it had completely cracked open. The sect master of calligraphy gazed at the Shura in the distance. Empress, do you really intend to destroy my Worldwide Academy? Lin Xiaoshu's face was expressionless as she walked slowly towards the sect master of calligraphy. Wasn't I wanted by the Worldwide Academy? Venerable calligrapher looked at Chen Tian, who was not far away, and asked, What happened? Chen Tian said in a deep voice, We are after Yi Xian's younger sister. But we didn't expect Yi Ling to look so similar to the Empress. Reverend Calligraphy frowned slightly. Put a warrant for Yi Xian's sister? Why? Chen Tian was silent. At this moment, Yi Ling suddenly said, He definitely wants to use his sister to threaten her, right? Speaking up to this point, her expression suddenly became ferocious. Because at this moment she thought of many things. In the lower realms, she'd been used to threaten that young man on more than one occasion. And that young man had almost died many times for her sake. When she thought up to here, a strand of indescribable flames of rage suddenly arose in Yi Ling's heart. In the next moment she suddenly flipped her palm. Boom! At this moment, dozens of academies in the surroundings were directly reduced to ashes. Seeing this scene, Lin Xiaoshu and Chen Tian's expressions immediately sank. If this Shura Empress didn't give up, it would be a disaster for the Worldwide Academy. Currently, the only person in the Worldwide Academy who could face this Empress head-on was the female teacher. However, they didn't know where the female teacher was. In the distance, Yi Ling looked around coldly. Finally, her gaze fell on Chen Tian. Those who used to be in the Worldwide Academy can all be called outstanding people. But you've done such a despicable thing. You've really disgraced the ancestors of the Worldwide Academy. As she spoke, she suddenly clenched her right hand. Boom! In an instant, a powerful force gathered in the area. At the same time, the sky above the Myriad Dimensions Academy suddenly darkened. Countless black clouds gathered, and within those black clouds countless evil spirits roared. Seeing this scene, all the experts of the Worldwide Academy were shocked. This was the destruction of the Worldwide Academy. Chen Tian's face was full of fear. What had he done? Wasn't he looking for Yi Ling? Why did he find a killing god? Empress, please show mercy. At this moment, a voice suddenly came from afar. Soon, a man appeared not far from Yi Ling. The man wore a blue robe, had long hair, and held a black flute in his hand. Lu Shidi. Some of the experts of the Worldwide Academy immediately recognized the man's identity. This man was one of the former 6 headmasters of the Worldwide Academy. Lu Shidi looked at the angry Yi Ling and quickly cupped his fists. Empress, this is the fault of the Worldwide Academy. Please show mercy. Yi Ling looked at Lu Shidi without saying a word. The force around them was getting stronger and stronger. Lu Shidi said in a low voice, Empress, please give face to my teacher. Prophet. Yi Ling frowned slightly. She didn't make a move, but the force around them didn't disappear either. Lu Shidi said again, Empress, my teacher founded the Worldwide Academy for the sake of the 5 dimensions and the world. Although it isn't as good as it used to be, it shouldn't be destroyed just like that. Please give face to my teacher and show mercy. Yi Ling was silent. Lu Shidi and the others were also silent. They knew that whether or not the Worldwide Academy would be spared depended on Yi Ling's decision. Of course, the Worldwide Academy wasn't completely defenseless. However, they didn't want to fight to the death, because once that happened, Even if the Worldwide Academy could stop the Empress, it could be said that it would suffer a great deal of damage. At this moment, Yi Ling suddenly looked up. Above the clouds in the sky, the space there trembled slightly. She frowned slightly, and the next moment she disappeared. Seeing the Empress disappear, everyone present heaved a sigh of relief. This Empress of the Shura was really too terrifying. Lu Shidi looked up at the sky and said softly, "Someone has made a move." Lin Xiaoshu asked, "Is it her?" Lu Shidi shook his head. "I didn't sense her aura." Lin Xiaoshu was silent. At this moment, Lu Shidi suddenly looked around and said softly, "Today is a humiliation for the Worldwide Academy." Humiliation. Hearing this, everyone present was silent. Today, the Worldwide Academy was almost destroyed by the Empress of the Shura alone. It could be said that this was indeed an extremely humiliating matter. After all, when the Prophet was still around, who would dare to act presumptuously in the Worldwide Academy? Who would dare? Even without the Prophet, the teacher, and the others, who would dare to bully the Worldwide Academy at that time? At this moment, Lin Xiaoshu suddenly looked at Chen Tian, who was in soul form nearby. "Why are you looking for Yi Ling?" Chen Tian was silent. Lu Shidi suddenly said, "Although this is a bit despicable, it is not entirely his fault. I have already investigated Yi Xian. He is not an ordinary person, especially the mysterious swordsman behind him. Her strength is definitely not weaker than ours, maybe even stronger. And Yi Xian's biggest weakness is that Yi Ling. If we can find Yi Ling, we can naturally subdue Yi Xian with a small price. Unfortunately, we did not expect that Yi Ling and the Empress of the Shura would look so similar, so much so that we have provoked the Empress." At this point he shook his head. It had to be said that this time, the Worldwide Academy's actions were very stupid. It could be said that outsiders would not sympathize with the Worldwide Academy, nor would they think that the Empress of the Shura was bullying others. They would only laugh at the Worldwide Academy for seeking death. Put out a warrant for the Empress of the Shura? Everyone knew that soon, the Worldwide Academy would become the joke of the entire fifth dimension. At this moment Chen Tian suddenly said, "This matter is my fault." Lu Shidi looked at Chen Tian. "Of course it is your fault. From now on, you are no longer the Academy Master of the Worldwide Academy." At this point he paused and then said, "This matter has become so big and so stupid. If I do not punish you, it will be difficult to convince the public." Chen Tian was silent. Lu Shidi looked at Lin Xiaoshu. "You do it." Lin Xiaoshu shook his head. "You know that I do not like to do these troublesome things. You do it." Lu Shidi was silent. Lin Xiaoshu said again, "Someone has to bear the responsibility." Lu Shidi nodded. "Yes." After that, he turned to look at a certain place and said softly, "We must open the Worldwide Library. Only this treasure vault left behind by teacher is able to change the current situation of our Myriad Dimension Academy." Lin Xiaoshu said in a deep voice, "That World Prism Pagoda is in Yi Xian's hands, and it has already recognized him as its master." Lu Shidi said softly, "Then take it back." Lin Xiaoshu looked at Lu Shidi. Lu Shidi smiled and said, "That World Prism Pagoda originally belongs to our Worldwide Academy. It is only right and proper for us to take it back, isn't it?" Lin Xiaoshu said in a deep voice, "He will not easily hand it over to us. Moreover, from what I know, that pagoda does not seem to be in his hands right now." Lu Shidi smiled. "That pagoda has already recognized him as its master. As long as he is willing, that pagoda can return to his hands at any time." Lin Xiaoshu was silent. Not far away, Chen Tian looked at Lu Shidi and Lin Xiaoshu. At this moment he suddenly understood. These people did not come back for the Worldwide Academy. Their real goal was the Worldwide Library. It was teacher's treasury. Thinking of this, Chen Tian shook his head and smiled. At this moment, he remembered the words of the Prophet. The most unpredictable thing in the world is the human heart. The most volatile thing in the world is also the human heart. At this moment, Chen Tian suddenly felt disheartened. Without thinking much, Chen Tian turned and left. In the distance, Lin Xiaoshu looked at Chen Tian. Lu Shidi said softly. "This time, he did such a stupid thing. Letting him live is already giving teacher face back then. After saying this, he looked at Lin Xiaoshu. Go inform all the experts of the Worldwide Academy outside. Tell them that our Worldwide Academy has reached a moment of life and death. Lin Xiaoshu frowned. Will they come back? Lu Shidi nodded. They will. Because they won't just watch as the Myriad Dimension Academy declines. Lin Xiaoshu nodded and turned to leave. Lu Shidi turned and looked not far away. That was where the Worldwide Library was located. Inside, there were treasures left behind by the Prophet. After a moment of silence, Lu Shidi turned and left. After the news of the Shura Empress being wanted by the Worldwide Academy, the entire Worldwide Academy became a laughingstock. The Shura Empress. It could be said that no one wanted to provoke the Shura Empress, who didn't want to avoid this place. However, the Worldwide Academy actually wanted to arrest the Shura Empress. Wasn't they tired of living? Somewhere in the clouds, Yi Xian was currently fighting with the sword spirit woman. On his back, he carried a giant sword, and in his hand was a light sword. When fighting with the sword spirit woman, when he used the light sword, his sword was like thunder, and as fast as lightning. When he switched to the heavy sword, his style changed abruptly. Under his sword, it was as heavy as 1,000 caddies, splitting the heavens and splitting the earth. Chapter 887. After practicing for an unknown period of time, Yi Xian stopped. At this moment, his whole body was drenched in sweat. Tired. That was how he felt at the moment. Using a heavy sword and a light sword was too taxing on the mind. Especially a heavy sword. Switching to a heavy sword consumed a lot of energy, while a light sword consumed a lot of the soul, because a light sword was a flying sword. At this moment, the sword spirit woman not far away suddenly said, You've learned well. Yi Xian looked at the sword spirit woman. The sword spirit said, But it's still not enough. You haven't switched fast enough. You have to switch fast enough. So fast that the other party can't even react when your sword has switched. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. I will continue to work hard. The sword spirit nodded. She looked at the executing heaven sword at Yi Xian's waist. Can I have a look at this sword? Yi Xian nodded. He took down the executing heaven sword and handed it to the sword spirit. The sword spirit took the executing heaven sword. She gently stroked the sword and said softly, Your sword is really sharp. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Sword Spirit, as far as I know, you are also a sword, right? The sword spirit looked at Yi Xian. Yes. Yi Xian said. Can I have a look at the sword spirit's real body? The sword spirit shook her head slightly. In terms of sharpness, I can't compare to your sword. In terms of realm, I can't compare to the sword that hurt me before. As she spoke, she handed the executing heaven sword to Yi Xian. You have great luck. You have a sword that others can never have in their lifetime. You must cherish it. Yi Xian took the executing heaven sword and said, There's another sword. With that, he took out the soul-suppressing sword. When she saw the soul-suppressing sword, a trace of surprise flashed in the sword spirit's eyes. This sword's soul. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. You're amazing. One sword is extremely sharp, and the other sword can restrain the soul. Yi Xian smiled. I'm lucky. The sword spirit nodded. Both swords are very good. Treasure them well. As she spoke, she seemed to have thought of something. She looked at the soul-suppressing sword and said softly, If you use this sword to perform Master Sword Soul skill, the power will not be ordinary. Yi Xian said seriously, That's what I think too. However, can I cultivate Sword Soul skills now? The sword spirit said, There's no hurry. The most important thing for you now is to practice your sword rules well. You have to practice switching between the heavy sword and the light sword to the extreme. Moreover, you have to learn to switch at the right time and not switch at will. Also, you have to find the right time to use your immeasurable sword and strive to kill when you strike. Understand? Boundless sword. Yi Xian nodded. He hadn't grasped the timing of the boundless sword well. The boundless sword was a flying sword. After using the heart sword mantra, its speed was much faster than before. Moreover, the distance it could cover was also much greater. However, This sword strike had to be timed in order to kill in one strike. Opportunity. To put it simply, it required combat experience. The sword spirit looked at Lien Wanli. If you two practice it, it will be very beneficial to you as well. The corners of Lien Wanli's mouth curled up slightly. That's exactly what I was thinking. As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her palm, and the azure dragon saber suddenly appeared in her hand. She looked at Yi Xian, and without any nonsense, she slashed the saber towards Yi Xian. The azure dragon roared as she swung the saber. In the distance, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly, and he directly vanished on the spot. A ray of sword light flashed across the field. Bang! An explosion suddenly resounded in the field. After the sword spirit glanced at the two of them, she turned to look outside. After a while she walked outside. In next to no time, she arrived outside, and a middle-aged man stood not too far away from her. The middle-aged man had a saber hanging horizontally behind his waist. The middle-aged man glanced behind the sword spirit. Where is this? The sword spirit looked at the middle-aged man and asked in reply, Who are you? The middle-aged man said, I'm here. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. Chen Yimeng. If there were outsiders here, they would definitely be shocked. Chen Yimeng was a famous saber cultivator in the fifth dimension. He was known as the Saber Monarch, and he was also one of the 6 leaders of the Worldwide Academy. Unfortunately, the sword spirit in front of him did not recognize him. The sword spirit looked at Chen Yimeng. This place does not welcome outsiders. Chen Yimeng shook his head. The person I am looking for is inside. The sword spirit slightly frowned. Yi Xian? Chen Yimeng nodded. It's him. The sword spirit suddenly disappeared. An array of sword light slashed towards Chen Yimeng. In front of him, Chen Yimeng lightly took a step back, and his body slightly leaned to the side, dodging the sword by a hair's breadth. However, at this moment, that ray of sword light suddenly slashed horizontally. Chi! The sound of air being torn suddenly resounded, but this sword slashed empty air. The sword spirit looked in front of him, and Chen Yimeng had unknowingly retreated a few meters. The sword spirit looked at Chen Yimeng, and she suddenly disappeared. The space in front of Chen Yimeng suddenly split open, and a ray of sword light appeared. Chen Yimeng's face was expressionless. His right hand suddenly grabbed forward, and then he squeezed. This squeeze directly caught a ray of sword light. The next moment he lightly exerted force with 2 fingers. Bang! The ray of sword light shattered, and a figure retreated explosively. It was the sword spirit. When the sword spirit stopped, she looked at Chen Yimeng, and at this moment, there was a trace of seriousness in her eyes. This person in front of her had crushed her without even drawing his saber. She wasn't a match for him. Very strong. At this moment, Chen Yimeng suddenly said, You aren't the person I want to kill. Tell that Yi Xian to come out. The sword spirit was about to speak, but at this moment, Yi Xian walked out from not too far away. When she saw Yi Xian, the sword spirit said in a low voice, This person is very strong. Yi Xian nodded, and he looked at the distant Chen Yimeng. At this moment, Lien Qian's voice suddenly resounded in his mind. It's the Saber Monarch. This person is extremely strong, and you aren't a match for him. Not a match for him. Yi Xian's face sank. Miss Lien Qian, this is too much of a blow to me. Lien Qian said in a low voice. You really aren't a match for him. Yi Xian looked at Chen Yimeng and said softly, Even if I'm not a match for him, I still have to fight. Lien Qian was silent. At this moment, Chen Yimeng looked at Yi Xian. He sized up Yi Xian and slightly nodded. No wonder Chen Tian was helpless. Not bad. Come, draw your sword. Draw his sword. Yi Xian looked at Chen Yimeng. He opened his palm, and the book world appeared in his hand. At this moment, Chen Yimeng suddenly said, Don't use this. As soon as he finished speaking, his realm was directly suppressed to the universe realm. This realm was the same as Yi Xian's current realm, and even lower than Chen Tian's realm. Yi Xian was silent. The other party was very confident. At this moment Lien Qian said, Be careful. Yi Xian nodded, and he looked at Chen Yimeng. He suddenly disappeared, and the next moment, a sword slashed at Chen Yimeng. Chen Yimeng took a step back with his right foot. This step was very slow, as if he was taking a stroll. However, it was this step that allowed Yi Xian's sword to slash at thin air. Yi Xian's sword slashed at thin air, but he didn't stop. He leaped up, and the sword in his hand stabbed forward as fast as lightning. Opposite Yi Xian, Chen Yiming moved sideways, and Yi Xian's sword slashed at thin air again. However, at this moment, Yi Xian's sword suddenly flew out. Immeasurable sword. With regards to this sword, Yi Xian was very confident, because the person in front of him was too arrogant. And the opponent's arrogance was his chance. Therefore, after 2 consecutive failures, he directly used a measurable sword for the third sword. However, he was dumbfounded when he unleashed the attack. No, this chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. In the distance, Chen Yiming was still standing there, holding a blade in his hand, and this blade was blocking a sword. It was blocked. Yi Xian looked at Chen Yiming. Although his expression was calm, his heart was in turmoil. Chen Yiming said softly, "Your sword is not bad. Whether it is the timing, speed, or power, they are all top-notch." Yi Xian said, "You were sent by Chen Tian." Chen Yiming shook his head. "He can't order me around. I came to find you myself." Yi Xian looked at Chen Yiming. "You are the one who wants to kill me." Chen Yiming nodded. "Come, continue to attack." Yi Xian nodded. "Okay." As his voice faded, he suddenly disappeared. In the distance, Chen Yiming unhurriedly placed the blade in his hand behind his back. At this moment, a ray of sword light appeared in front of his eyebrows, and he used his fingers to clamp it. He was very confident, because Yi Xian's sword speed wasn't enough to threaten him. However, at this moment, the sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly turned into a heavy sword, and he used 2 fingers to clamp this heavy sword. However, the strength of this sword was completely different. Bang! Chen Yiming instantly retreated several meters. After he stopped, he looked at his right hand. His entire right hand was full of cracks. Yi Xian's sword just now almost destroyed his entire right hand. Chen Yiming looked at Yi Xian. Very interesting. Yi Xian put away his heavy sword and changed to a light sword. His figure suddenly disappeared, and he once again used the immeasurable sword. In the distance, bang! Yi Xian's sword was blocked by Chen Yiming's blade. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly pulled out the heavy sword from his back and fiercely slashed forward. Chen Yiming didn't retreat. He used his blade to block. Bang! A strong force exploded in front of the 2 of them. This time, Chen Yiming didn't retreat even half a step, while Yi Xian returned to his original position. However, the moment he stopped, the sword in his hand flew out again. The immeasurable sword. In the distance, Chen Yiming used his blade to block. Bang! Yi Xian's sword was directly deflected, but Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of Chen Yiming. He held the deflected sword and fiercely slashed forward. At this moment, Chen Yiming suddenly used his blade to block. Bang! Before Yi Xian's sword landed, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. Then, he once again returned to his original position. Yi Xian was silent. From start to finish, this person in front of him didn't draw his blade. If the other party had drawn his blade, he would already be dead. Chen Yiming suddenly walked towards Yi Xian. "According to what I know, within the same year, there aren't many who are more outstanding than you. Unfortunately, you are my academy's enemy." Yi Xian suddenly said, "Have you ever thought about why I became your academy's enemy?" Chen Yiming stopped and looked at Yi Xian. "Because that tower is in your hands." Yi Xian smiled. "Why is that tower in my hands?" Chen Yiming was silent. In a certain space, Lian Qian shook her head. This guy, if he could win, he wouldn't talk nonsense. If he couldn't win, he would reason. At this moment, Yi Xian added, "Because the tower recognized me as its master." "Sir, is it my fault or the academy's fault that the tower recognized me as its master? Or is it teacher's fault?" Chen Yiming frowned slightly. "Teacher?" Yi Xian said seriously. "To be honest, I am teacher's new student. Moreover, I have received teacher's inheritance and control most of the Dao laws. Strictly speaking, you should call me junior. Do you really want us to fight each other?" Lian Qian. "P.S. Let me ask everyone a question. What is your average monthly income? I want to see what kind of industry is more popular." End of this chapter. Chapter 888. Opposite Yi Xian. Chen Yiming was silent. Seeing Chen Yiming's silence, Yi Xian said, "Senior brother Chen." At this time, Chen Yiming suddenly said, "Why did you kill my students?" Yi Xian said, "Chen Tian and the others wanted to kill me. In order to protect myself, I could only kill." Chen Yiming shook his head. "You are a flowery person with no truth." Yi Xian said, "But Xiao Ta recognized me as his master, didn't he?" Chen Yiming nodded, "I know." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. "Take one strike from me. If you don't die after one strike, I'll do another." Yi Xian. Chen Yiming placed his left hand on the hilt of the saber behind his waist. He stepped forward, and a saber intent enveloped Yi Xian. Yi Xian was about to speak when Lian Qian suddenly said, "Run! Run!" Yi Xian looked at Chen Yiming and shook his head. He knew that if he ran now, it would become a thorn in his heart, a thorn that could never be removed. Moreover, he believed that he couldn't escape. Even with the immeasurable sword, he couldn't escape. Moreover, he didn't think about running. Wasn't it just taking 2 strikes? Who was afraid of who? Yi Xian said, "Can I use any method?" Chen Yiming nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Come on." Chen Yiming nodded, drew his saber and slashed. It was a very casual dao-drawing slash. However, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically in an instant. Not only Yi Xian, but the sword spirit's expression also turned grave at this moment. She couldn't take this strike. Could Yi Xian take it? The sword spirit looked at Yi Xian. At this time, a 7-colored talisman suddenly flew out from between Yi Xian's eyebrows. World-breaking talisman. Facing Chen Yiming, Yi Xian didn't dare to hold back. He directly used the 7-colored talisman that Fu Wenzong had given him. The moment the talisman appeared, it suddenly turned into a sword tip and disappeared. Break the world. Boom. Space suddenly split apart because it wasn't able to endure the might of the talisman at all. Boom. Along with an explosion, the sound of shattering resounded. After a short moment, a talisman floated down from above Yi Xian. It was the 7-colored talisman. At this moment, the 7-colored talisman had already lost its luster. Damaged. Fortunately, he managed to block Chen Yiming's saber. Yi Xian put away the 7-colored talisman and looked at Chen Yiming. Chen Yiming nodded, as expected of a talisman drawn by him. It is indeed powerful. No wonder Master regarded him so highly in the past. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. "Take another strike from me. This time I won't hold back." As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward, and then the saber in his hand suddenly flew forward. It was a very slow strike, and it didn't carry any saber energy or glow. It was just a very simple strike. On the other hand, Yi Xian's countenance had turned pale at this moment. He knew that if he didn't use his full strength, then he would definitely die. Yi Xian didn't dare hold back at all. He suddenly stomped his right foot against the ground. When the saber arrived around 3 m away from him, a blood-red prisoner character suddenly appeared above the saber. At the same time, a strand of red light enveloped the entire saber. However, bang! The blood-red prisoner character instantly vanished. However, the saber had become much more illusory. Meanwhile, the saber had arrived before the center of Yi Xian's forehead. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly roared furiously, and a mysterious force suddenly appeared around him. The sword domain! It wasn't just the sword domain, there was the spatial Dao laws as well. Both of them were suppressing him at the same time. Bang! The saber suddenly stopped. However, at this moment, the saber had already pierced half an inch into the center of Yi Xian's forehead. The entire saber trembled violently, and so did Yi Xian's body. He was almost unable to withstand the power of this saber. Opposite Yi Xian, Chen Yiming didn't withdraw his saber, nor did he attack again. He just looked at Yi Xian. If he wanted to kill Yi Xian now, he only needed a single thought. Because if he attacked again, Yi Xian wouldn't be able to withstand it no matter what. However, he didn't draw his saber. Chen Yiming opened his palm, and the saber between Yi Xian's eyebrows suddenly flew into his hand. He turned and left. Behind him, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Why? Chen Yiming stopped and said softly, I really want to kill you because you are very outstanding. You are an enemy of the academy, and the academy will be in danger in the future. But, saying this, he raised his head and looked at the horizon, and said softly, Teacher once told me that no matter how strong my saber is, it can't be stronger than reason. I asked him what reason is, and he said that reason is in his heart. Saying this, he turned and looked at Yi Xian. Xiaota isn't from the Worldwide Academy, and the Universal Library isn't from the Worldwide Academy. The Worldwide Academy doesn't have the right to take these two things for themselves. Xiaota recognized you as his master, so it's yours. The Academy is targeting you, and this is the Academy's fault. If I come to kill you because of this, then it's my fault. However, if one day you want to destroy the Academy, I will definitely kill you. Saying this, he turned and left. At this moment, Lian Qian suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian. She glanced at Chen Yiming's back and said softly, He hasn't changed. Yi Xian looked at Lian Qian. Lian Qian said softly, He is actually a pitiful person. He was originally a scholar, but his family was destroyed. It was Master who passed by and saved him. He knelt outside Master's door for 10 days and 10 nights, begging Master to help him take revenge. Master didn't help him take revenge, but taught him how to read and learn the saber. 5 years later, Master brought him to the sect that destroyed his family, and let him make his own choice. Yi Xian asked, How did he choose? Lian Qian said softly, At first he was afraid, very, very afraid. He was afraid that if he killed his enemies, Master would expel him from the academy. However, if he didn't take revenge, he wouldn't be satisfied. In the end, he still killed all his enemies. After killing all his enemies, he knelt in front of Master and kowtowed 3 times. Then he wanted to commit suicide, but Master stopped him. Master said to him, A life for a life. This is reason, and he didn't do anything wrong. Yi Xian was silent. Lian Qian continued. From then on, he firmly remembered Master's words. Using reason as a saber, he achieved the unparalleled saber Dao, and he was respectfully called the Saber King. As she said this, she looked at Yi Xian. You should be glad that it wasn't Wenxiu who came to find you this time. Otherwise you might have died. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Wenxiu, Lian Qian said softly. Among all of Master's disciples, her strength is second only to the headmaster. She doesn't like to study, but she likes to play with the spear. Her spear skills are unparalleled. In the academy, except for Master, she isn't afraid of anyone. In the past, she fought with eldest sister countless times. She is extremely powerful, and people call her the godly spear Zhang Wenxiu. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Miss Lian Qian, don't scare me. Lian Qian shook her head. When Master was around, there were many strong people in the academy. The academy was really good at that time. Unfortunately, after Master left, many things changed. Do you know? In the beginning, the people who fought for Xiaota weren't others, but our academy's own people. And the reason why the headmaster left was not because he didn't care about the academy, but because he knew that the hearts of the people in the academy had changed. He could change the academy, but he couldn't change the hearts of the people. Saying this, she paused and then continued. The most changeable thing in the world is the hearts of the people. Yi Xian shook his head. Looks like I have to work hard. Lian Qian nodded. You do have to work hard. To open the Universal Library, you need Xiaota's cooperation. And since Xiaota has already recognized you as his master, the academy will treat you as the biggest threat. Yi Xian said. But Xiaota isn't with me anymore. Lian Qian shook her head. They won't believe it. They know Xiaota's ability. If he recognizes you as his master, as long as you want, Xiaota will definitely return to your side. Yi Xian was speechless. Lian Qian continued. The Worldwide Academy used to be the #1 power in the 5th dimension. You can't imagine how deep its foundation was. So, your top priority now is to become stronger and learn from the sword spirit. Also, you have to increase your realm. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Saying this, he looked at the sword spirit. I'll have to trouble you during this period of time. The sword spirit nodded. Let's begin. In the following period of time, Yi Xian continued to train with the sword spirit. However, he would also train with Lian Wanli sometimes. Thus, during this period of time, Lian Qian's improvement was very fast. On the side, Lian Qian had a trace of worry on her face. This was because she discovered that the people who had disappeared from the Worldwide Academy had started to appear one by one. She knew that these people wouldn't give up the World Prism Pagoda. Not everyone was like Qin Yimeng. Thinking of this, Lian Qian sighed softly. She looked at Yi Xian, who was not far away. She could only say that everything depended on Yi Xian's luck. In fact, what she was really worried about was if Yi Xian really died at the hands of the Worldwide Academy. This was because once Yi Xian died at the hands of the Worldwide Academy, an enemy would appear in the Worldwide Academy. The woman in the plain dress. Would the woman in the plain dress be afraid of the Worldwide Academy? In her opinion, that woman would not be afraid of anyone. Would anyone in the Worldwide Academy be able to stop this woman? Even if a female teacher appeared, she might not be able to stop her. If Yi Xian died, the Worldwide Academy would be in big trouble. At the Worldwide Academy, after Lu Shidi took over the Worldwide Academy, he immediately started to reorganize the Worldwide Academy. One by one, the experts began to return to the Worldwide Academy. This was because the news that the Great Empress had single-handedly suppressed the Worldwide Academy had spread. Anger. At this moment, the experts of the Worldwide Academy were all furious. When had the Worldwide Academy ever been humiliated like this? Therefore, more and more experts of the Worldwide Academy returned to the Worldwide Academy. In other words, the Worldwide Academy had not been weakened because of the Shura Empress. Instead, it had become stronger and stronger. Because the main library of the Myriad Dimensional Academy had been destroyed, Lu Shidi moved to a library on the right side of the academy. At this moment, almost all the experts of the Worldwide Academy had gathered in the library. Beside Lu Shidi was Lin Xiaoshu. Lu Shidi looked at the crowd and said, "Everyone, since the establishment of the Worldwide Academy, this is the first time we have been humiliated like this." As he spoke, he stood up. This humiliation must be washed away with blood. Below, an old man suddenly said, "Are we going to start a war with the Shura Hell?" Lu Shidi said calmly, "No, kill Yi Xian first." Chapter 889. They had to kill Yi Xian first. Everyone in the hall was silent. Yi Xian. Hearing this name, everyone's face turned gloomy. Yi Xian was the reason why the Worldwide Academy was bullied by the Empress. And it was also this person who killed many powerful people from the Worldwide Academy. At this time, Lu Shidi said, "Xiao Tao originally belonged to the Worldwide Academy, but it was seized by Yi Xian. The Worldwide Academy must take it back." Below, an old man said in a deep voice, "But Yi Xian has Fu Wenzong to protect him." Lu Shidi was expressionless. "So let's kill Fu Wenzong first. Kill Fu Wenzong first." The expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed. Fu Wenzong wasn't a third-rate force. Fu Wenzong was considered a first-rate force. Although it was slightly worse than the Worldwide Academy, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that easy to kill Fu Wenzong. Even if they were killed, they would have to pay a terrible price. As if he knew what everyone was thinking, Lu Shidi suddenly said, "If the Worldwide Academy fought alone, it would naturally be difficult to kill Fu Wenzong. But what if someone helped us?" Someone helped us. In the hall, everyone looked at Lu Shidi. Lu Shidi said softly, "Everyone get ready and wait for my orders." Soon, everyone in the hall left, leaving only Lu Shidi and Lin Xiaoshu. Lin Xiaoshu said, "Who did you find?" Lu Shidi said, "The corpse clan of Southern Border." Hearing this, Lin Xiaoshu frowned. "You found them?" Lu Shidi said softly, "Only they would be willing to destroy Fu Wenzong at all costs." Lin Xiaoshu asked, "Why?" Lu Shidi said with a smile, "Because the current corpse race's patriarch is the super genius who was chased out by Fu Wenzong back then." Lin Xiaoshu said softly, "It's him. Why did he go to the Southern Border? And he even became the corpse clan's patriarch?" Lu Shidi shook his head. "I don't know. When I was studying abroad, I went to that place. That guy was always thinking about revenge. That's exactly what we wanted." Lin Xiaoshu fell silent for a moment before he said, "According to my knowledge, Xiaota doesn't seem to be in Yi Xian's possession anymore." Lu Shidi said, "It's not in his hands, but that Xiaota has already recognized him as his master, and that Xiaota himself has seized the fortune of heaven and earth. As long as he wants, Xiaota will definitely return to his side. Moreover, this pagoda recognized him as its owner. In other words, if he was given the chance, he could open the universal library and obtain the treasures within. Therefore he must die." Lin Xiaoshu was silent. Lu Shidi said softly, "Xiaoshu, I know this isn't honorable, but think about it. The academy today isn't the academy of the past. If we don't obtain the treasures left behind by teacher, how can we fight against the super experts of this world? Or do you want the worldwide academy to experience the same situation as before, where life and death are in the hands of others?" Lin Xiaoshu was silent. It had to be said that he was suppressed by the Shura Empress alone, which made him feel very sullen. When had the worldwide academy ever suffered such humiliation? And the reason why it was humiliated was because the worldwide academy was currently weak. What the worldwide academy used in the past was no longer feasible. Thinking of this, Lin Xiaoshu sighed softly. "Do as you wish." After saying this, he turned around and left. Inside the hall, Lu Shidi was expressionless and didn't speak for a long time. Shura hell. Within a certain dark room, Yi Ling sat silently on a square chair constructed from a pile of bones, and there were two elderly men hovering behind her. And in front of Yi Ling, a Xiaota floated. The World Prism Pagoda. The World Prism Pagoda trembled slightly, as if expressing something. Yi Ling didn't speak. At this time, an elder behind Yi Ling suddenly said, "Master, this pagoda doesn't seem to reject you." Yi Ling looked at the World Prism Pagoda. She naturally knew why this Xiaota didn't reject her. This was his pagoda. After a moment, Yi Ling suddenly said, "I know you've awakened, give me an answer." No response. Yi Ling narrowed her eyes. A powerful pressure suddenly enveloped the World Prism Pagoda. At this time, a voice sounded from inside the pagoda. "I have no grievances with you, sir. Why must you be so overbearing?" Yi Ling looked at the World Prism Pagoda. "Give me an answer." The voice said, "Don't worry, sir. I won't seek death by targeting him." Yi Ling was silent. Killing intent condensed in her eyes. At this time the voice spoke again. "Sir, I have no malice towards him. If I did, I would have already killed him in the fourth dimension. The reason why I can't leave this pagoda is because of me, not because I don't want to leave." After a moment of silence, Yi Ling pointed with her finger. A black light suddenly entered the World Prism Pagoda. Then she said softly, "Go." The World Prism Pagoda trembled slightly, turned into a black light, and disappeared. At this time, the elder behind Yi Ling suddenly appeared and blocked the World Prism Pagoda. But the World Prism Pagoda directly crashed into him. Boom! The elder retreated several feet. When he stopped, the World Prism Pagoda had already disappeared. The elder looked at Yi Ling. "Master, Yi Ling said softly. "What do you want to say?" The elder spoke in a low voice. "Master, this is the key to the Universal Library. With this key, you can open that library." "Master, why did you?" Yi Ling said, "It's just a library." The elder hesitated for a moment and said, "Master seems to care a lot about that young man, Yi Xian." Yi Ling looked at the elder. The latter's expression changed, and he hurriedly bent down. Yi Ling looked at the elder. "This person is related to me. The two of you can't touch him. Understand?" The elder nodded. "Your subordinate understands." Yi Ling slowly closed her eyes. "I'm going into closed-door cultivation for a while, in order to deal with those old geezers down there." The elder's expression instantly became solemn when he heard this. The Azura Hell. This place wasn't called hell for nothing. Yi Ling's face was emotionless. She suddenly looked at her right hand, and there was a small wooden figure there. The two elders behind her didn't dare say anything and left silently. High up in the clouds, Yi Xian, who was sparring with Lian Wanli, suddenly stopped and looked up into the sky. A black dot was flying over from there, and it didn't take long for the pagoda of prison to appear in front of Yi Xian. "I'm back." Yi Xian was stunned. Meanwhile, the pagoda of prison directly entered Yi Xian's chest. Yi Xian blinked. What's going on? Why did Xiao Ta fly back by himself? Yi Xian opened his palm, and the pagoda of prison appeared within it. The pagoda of prison trembled violently, as if it was trying to express something. Yi Xian chuckled lightly and said, "All right, I won't make you go out and attract firepower in the future." The pagoda of prison flickered on the spot, and then it transformed into a ray of black light that entered Yi Xian's body. The pagoda of prison. Yi Xian smiled slightly. Actually, after spending so much time with the pagoda of prison, he still had feelings for it. Moreover, the pagoda of prison seemed to be closer to him than before. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian's face suddenly turned ashen. Xiao Ta's return wasn't entirely a good thing. There was still a 9th floor in this pagoda. I wonder if this guy is easy to talk to. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian put away the pagoda of prison. He looked at Lian Wanli in front of him and said, "Come, continue." As soon as he finished speaking, he directly rushed out. In the distance, the corner of Lian Wanli's mouth lifted slightly. He drew his saber and slashed, and the azure dragon roared. On the side, the sword spirit walked to Lian Qian's side and said softly, "His comprehension isn't particularly high, but he is very hardworking." Lian Qian nodded. "If he doesn't have top-notch talent and doesn't work hard, then what hope does he have?" The sword spirit said softly, "Master was also very hardworking back then." Lian Qian said, "I'm very curious, did he die or?" The sword spirit said, "His lifespan ended." Lifespan? Lian Qian was silent. There were many strong people in this world, and most of them died because their lifespan ended. Who could not die? Even the most powerful person would have a day when their lifespan ended. Could anyone live forever? She didn't know, because she had asked the prophet, but she didn't get an answer. Just like that, after about 5 days, Yi Xian began to cultivate the sword soul. The reason why he cultivated the sword soul was actually to support his sword rule. Moreover, he had the soul-subduing sword, so he couldn't waste the soul-subduing sword's special ability to target the soul. In the following time, Yi Xian began to cultivate his soul crazily. Time passed day by day. During this time, the Worldwide Academy was very quiet, and there was no movement. It was worth mentioning that Chen Tian had left the Worldwide Academy. As for where he went, no one knew. Fu Wenzong. Inside the rune hall, Shen Xinghe's face was gloomy, and beside him was Lu Yong. Shen Xinghe suddenly said, "The Worldwide Academy is too quiet." Lu Yong nodded. "It's very abnormal. I've already asked our people to return to Fu Wenzong." Shen Xinghe said, "What about little Grandmaster?" Lu Yong said, "We lost contact. However, he should be fine." Shen Xinghe shook his head. "No, since Lu Shidi has appeared, the other 6 headmasters might also appear. If these people target little Grandmaster, he will be in a very dangerous situation. We have to contact him and ask him to return to Fu Wenzong quickly." Lu Yong nodded, and at this moment, the expressions of the 2 people in the hall suddenly changed. In the next moment, the 2 of them disappeared from the hall. Outside the hall, more than 10 corpses suddenly fell from the sky, accompanied by blood. These corpses landed steadily in front of Lu Yong and Shen Xinghe. They were all Fu Wenzong's people. Seeing this, Shen Xinghe's expression immediately became gloomy. He raised his head to look at the sky, but there was no one there. Lu Yong said softly, "They've made a move." Shen Xinghe said, "How many people are willing to come and help?" Lu Yong said, "The weapon refining sect has already agreed to help us. They'll be here soon." Shen Xinghe asked again, "What else?" Lu Yong said, "There are some aristocratic families, but they don't have many experts. As for those top forces, none of them have expressed their stance. I guess they don't want to get involved in this mess." Shen Xinghe sneered. "When these people usually beg us, they all talk about climbing a mountain of knives and plunging into a sea of flames. Now that I, Fu Wenzong, have something to do, they all play dumb." Lu Yong said softly, "This is how the world works." Shen Xinghe was about to speak, but at this moment, a cloud of black gas suddenly appeared in the distant sky. The next moment, this cloud of black gas directly covered Fu Wenzong. At this moment, Lu Yong's expression changed greatly. There's poison. Be careful. In the sky, a man suddenly appeared. This person was the current Academy Master of the Worldwide Academy, Lu Shidi. In the sky, Lu Shidi looked down. If Yi Xian appears, concentrate on killing this person first. If he doesn't appear, then kill Fu Wenzong's people one by one, until he appears. P.S. Sorry brothers, I made a mistake. Recently, I was brought to a healthcare center by a reader, and for a moment, I couldn't control myself and became muddle-headed. My fault. I will definitely control myself in the future. I will definitely not go to an illegal healthcare center. I will send everyone a red packet. Chapter 890. In the mountains, Yi Xian, who was sparring, suddenly stopped. He took out a voice transmission talisman. After a while, he frowned and a cold light flashed in his eyes. At this moment, the sword spirit suddenly said, "What's wrong?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Something happened to my sect." He did not expect that the Worldwide Academy would besiege Fu Wenzong. They were going to fight to the death. The sword spirit nodded slightly. "Are you leaving?" Yi Xian nodded and looked at the sword spirit. "Miss Sword Spirit, do you want to go together?" The sword spirit shook her head. "I won't leave this place." Yi Xian hesitated and was about to speak when the sword spirit said, "This is my home. Don't say anything more." Yi Xian was silent. At this moment, Lian Qian's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. She won't leave. Master wanted to take her away, but she didn't want to leave. Yi Xian looked at the blind swordsman not far away and said softly, "Miss Sword Spirit, are you going to keep watching over him?" The sword spirit smiled. "This is my home." Yi Xian sighed and did not try to persuade her. He bowed slightly and said, "Miss Sword Spirit, I'll come back to you after I've settled my matters." The sword spirit nodded. "Sure." Yi Xian smiled. "See you later." After saying that, he flew up on his sword and disappeared into the sky in the blink of an eye. The sword spirit was silent for a while. Then she turned and left. After a while, she picked a large bouquet of flowers and placed them in the pool, letting them drift with the water. Looking at the petals floating on the water, the sword spirit's eyes gradually became infatuated. Fu Wenzong. At this moment above Fu Wenzong, there was a black cloud layer. Within that black cloud layer, there were countless powerful auras. Down below, Shen Xinghe looked up at Lu Shidi, who was in the air. "So it's Master Lu." In the air, Lu Shidi looked down at Shen Xinghe and said, "You Fu Wenzong have never offended our Worldwide Academy. You Fu Wenzong brought this upon yourself. You can't blame anyone else." Shen Xinghe smiled and said, "Estate Head Lu, it was clearly your Worldwide Academy that coveted my little Grandmaster's World Prison Pagoda. What, you want to be a whore and also want to erect a chastity memorial arch?" Lu Shidi chuckled. "I hope Sect Master Shen can still talk later." As he spoke, he looked at the opposite side. "Why? You're not coming out to meet your martial nephew?" A middle-aged man walked out from the black clouds in the distance. Upon seeing this middle-aged man, Shen Xinghe's face instantly darkened. "Yin Tian, it's you." Yin Tian. Hearing this name, the expressions of some of the Fu Wenzong experts changed. Yin Tian was a famous genius of Fu Wenzong in the past. Moreover, he was also Shen Xinghe's martial uncle. However, for some unknown reason, he was directly expelled from Fu Wenzong by the previous Fu Wenzong sect master. Hearing this, Yin Tian narrowed his eyes, and a cold light flickered in his eyes. "Brother Lu, what's wrong? We're attacking Fu Wenzong together. But you don't want to do anything?" Lu Shidi shook his head. "Of course not, Brother Yin. The most terrifying thing about Fu Wenzong right now isn't this Shen Xinghe, or that little girl with the sword. It's that Yi Xian. If we don't guard against him, we'll pay a terrible price." Yin Tian said in a low voice. "Lu Shidi, I'm not going to argue with you. I only have one question. Are your people going to attack or not? If not, the old man will turn around and leave right now." Lu Shidi frowned. "Brother Yin, don't you know how terrifying Yi Xian is?" Yin Tian said fiercely. I only know that my people are dying one after another. Lu Shidi, are you trying to let all my people die, so that you can take advantage of the situation? Lu Shidi was about to speak when Yin Tian suddenly roared furiously. Are you going to attack or not? Lu Shidi glanced at Yin Tian and said, Attack. As soon as he finished speaking, a few old men suddenly appeared behind him, and they charged down. Even though there were only 4 of them, their strengths were extremely formidable, and they directly destroyed a huge expanse of talisman energy. Coupled with Yin Tian's super god corpses, they seemed to be on the verge of a counterattack. On the other hand, Lu Shidi grew even more vigilant. He didn't dare underestimate Yi Xian, because the Worldwide Academy had paid a terrible price for underestimating Yi Xian. Moreover, he knew that Yi Xian was extremely skilled in concealment and assassination. Yi Xian didn't draw his sword, but once he did, his enemies would definitely die. However, Yi Xian still hadn't appeared. Below, Shen Xinghe and the others were still madly activating the orange talismans. These orange talismans were like paper. Under the situation where Shen Xinghe and the others were madly activating the orange talismans, Yin Tian's side was once again at a disadvantage. Yin Tian looked at Lu Shidi and was about to speak. Right at this moment, the space in front of Lu Shidi suddenly trembled. In the next moment, his expression changed greatly. He's gone to the academy. Not good, his target is the worldwide bookstore. Let's go back to the academy. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and directly disappeared into the horizon. Chapter 891. At that moment, Lu Shidi was shocked. He finally knew why Yi Xian didn't appear. It wasn't that Yi Xian didn't appear, but that he had gone to the Worldwide Academy. Now that there was no one at the Worldwide Academy who could stop Yi Xian. More importantly, the Worldwide Book Room was at the Worldwide Academy. If Yi Xian had the key to the prison tower, he might be able to open the Worldwide Book Room. Once it fell into Yi Xian's hands, Lu Shidi didn't dare to think about it. At that moment, all the Worldwide Academy experts rushed back to the Worldwide Academy. Yin Tian, on the other hand, was dumbfounded. They ran just like that. Below, Seven suddenly said, Leave them here. The moment she said this, she tapped the ground and turned into a sword light that charged into the sky. When he saw that, Yin Tian's expression changed. Retreat. Very quickly, everyone retreated. Fu Wenzong naturally wouldn't give up this chance, and chased after them. One had to say that Fu Wenzong's fighting was really interesting. He just smashed talismans like crazy. He was just so rich. However, Yin Tian and the others fled really quickly, and Fu Wenzong and the others weren't able to stop all of them. In the sky, Lu Yong suddenly said, We can't chase them. Head to the Worldwide Academy. When she heard Lu Yong's words, Seven stopped. Lu Yong said, Little Ancestor has headed to the Worldwide Academy and is in danger. We have to rush to the Worldwide Academy. Seven nodded. Let's go. The moment she said this, she turned into a sword light and disappeared into the horizon. Lu Yong suddenly said, Bring all the talismans. Take out all that Fu Wenzong has accumulated. If Little Ancestor is in danger, then blow up the Worldwide Academy. Very quickly, all the experts from Fu Wenzong rushed to the Worldwide Academy. The entire sect was out. At that moment, numerous people were shocked. Fu Wenzong was risking his life. Worldwide Academy. Under Lin Qian's instructions, Yi Xian quietly arrived at the Worldwide Academy. After he entered a grand hall, he walked along the secret Daoyi path in the grand hall. He used the immeasurable sword, so no one noticed him along the way. However, when he reached a door at the end of the secret passage, a mirror on the wall suddenly shone on him. Yi Xian's expression immediately changed. He knew that he had been discovered. Yi Xian casually waved his hand and put the mirror away. Then, he sped up and quickly passed through the door. Not far behind the door sat an old man. The old man wore a loose robe and had a long beard. He supported himself with a walking stick and just sat there quietly, without any signs of life. On either side of him were rows of bookshelves. On the bookshelves were all sorts of ancient texts. Behind the old man was a door of light. Above the door of light was the seal of a tower. Yi Xian glanced at it. It was the same seal as the one in the prison pagoda. Clearly, behind this door was the legendary world-dimensional bookhouse. Then, who was this old man in front of him? Yi Xian asked in his heart. Miss Lian Qian? Lian Qian said in a deep voice. I don't know this person. Yi Xian glanced at the old man. Do you think he will hit me? Lian Qian said. You can try. Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. Boom. An explosion suddenly sounded. The next moment, Yi Xian returned to his original position. And the old man was still sitting there. Where he stood, Yi Xian's expression turned ugly. This old man's strength was unfathomable. At this moment Lian Qian suddenly said, Retreat. Without any hesitation, Yi Xian turned and left. Because he had been discovered. He knew that if he stayed here, he would definitely die when the experts from the Worldwide Academy rushed back. He couldn't be greedy. And the old man didn't chase after him. Soon Yi Xian arrived outside. At this moment, he sensed countless powerful auras in the distant sky. Yi Xian didn't hesitate, and was about to flee. At this moment, an angry shout suddenly resounded from above the clouds. Where do you think you're going? As soon as the voice finished speaking, an ancient book suddenly flew down from the sky. The next moment, a resplendent white light erupted from the ancient book. This white light enveloped the entire Worldwide Academy, and shone on where Yi Xian was. And the space he was in started to tremble violently. At the same time, dozens of powerful auras enveloped him. Yi Xian's expression sank. He had been discovered. He had just woken up, and was about to use the teleportation talisman, when a mysterious force suddenly appeared in the surrounding space. This force directly suppressed the space he was in. Just as he was about to use the spatial Dao Law, Lu Shidi and the others appeared in front of him. Along with them were dozens of super experts from the Worldwide Academy. These people surrounded Yi Xian tightly. Yi Xian asked in his heart, Miss Lian Qian, what should we do? Lian Qian said, surrender. Yi Xian was speechless. Lian Qian added, perhaps you can reason with them. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and felt that this method was feasible. He was about to speak when Lu Shidi suddenly said, kill him. Don't hold back. Everyone attack together. As soon as he finished speaking, the flute in his hand suddenly transformed into a green ray of light that shot explosively towards Yi Xian. Lin Xiaoshu, who was next to him, also suddenly made a move. He opened his palm, and a thick book appeared in his palm. In the next moment, the ancient book suddenly flipped open, and pages flew out. These pages were like blades that flew towards Yi Xian, one blade after another, extremely sharp. Meanwhile, the surrounding experts from the Worldwide Academy attacked as well. Yi Xian was stunned. They didn't even give him a chance to speak. He naturally couldn't resist so many people attacking at the same time. However, at this moment, he had to resist even if he couldn't. Yi Xian's body suddenly ignited. It wasn't soul ignition, but he had devoured a drop of ancestral heavenly dragon blood, strengthening his body. When the dragon blood entered his body, Yi Xian's body underwent an earth-shattering change. Scales suddenly appeared all over his body. At this moment, Yi Xian felt like his entire body was filled with boundless energy, but it still wasn't enough. So, he immediately circulated the energy of the earth, and it instantly converged throughout his body. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and swung it forward. Bang! A world-shaking explosion suddenly resounded. Yi Xian retreated madly, and the scales throughout his body actually started to crack inch by inch. When he was 3 kilometers away, all the scales on his body had fallen off, and then his body started to crack apart. When he finally stopped moving, countless rifts had appeared all over his body, and some of the rifts were so deep that even his internal organs could be seen. Even though he'd survived it, he was in an extremely terrible state. His entire body had changed beyond recognition, and he didn't seem like a human anymore. However, the expressions of Lu Shidi and the others grew even more solemn. Yi Xian had actually resisted their joint attack. Was that normal? Of course it wasn't. Lu Shidi stared fixedly at Yi Xian. At this moment, he finally understood why Chen Tian had been constantly targeting Yi Xian. If Yi Xian was allowed to grow, then he would definitely become a huge threat to the academy. He was truly too monstrous. Lu Shidi was just about to attack again, when a group of experts suddenly rushed over from afar. It was Shen Xinghe, Fu Wenzong and the other experts. Shen Xinghe instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Yi Xian was still alive. He'd been afraid that he would be too late. Fortunately, Yi Xian was still alive. Lu Shidi gazed at Yi Xian from afar, and the killing intent in his eyes wasn't concealed at all. Meanwhile, Shen Xinghe spoke abruptly. Young martial ancestor, you leave first. Leave first. Yi Xian shook his head. He knew that the Worldwide Academy wouldn't let them leave today. Yi Xian took out a bottle of life spring water and drank it. Soon, his body began to recover at an extremely fast speed. Meanwhile, rays of white light suddenly shot into the sky from all around the Worldwide Academy. The white light formed a huge light shield that enveloped the surroundings, and more experts from the Worldwide Academy appeared in the surroundings. Obviously, they didn't intend to let Yi Xian and the others leave. Below, Shen Xinghe's face was expressionless. Young martial ancestor, you leave first. Lu Yong wanted to say something but hesitated. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, Old Shen, don't even think about leaving. Shen Xinghe looked at Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian had recovered about 50% to 60%. Yi Xian smiled and said, They won't let us leave. We only have a single choice now, and it's to fight them to the death. Lu Yong nodded. Just as young martial ancestor said, We have no way out now. If we lose this battle, then I, Fu Wenzong, will vanish from this world, and I won't have any chance to make a comeback. So we can only fight. As he spoke, he gazed at Yi Xian. Young martial ancestor, can you still fight? Yi Xian smiled. Of course. As soon as he finished speaking, he withdrew another drop of ancestral heavenly dragon's blood and drank it. In next to no time, a strand of formidable energy converged within his entire body. This energy was intoxicating. Yi Xian slowly clenched his right fist. He raised his head to look at Lu Shidi, and then he grinned. Dean Lu, do you dare to fight me? A declaration of war. Everyone looked at Yi Xian when they heard this. Yi Xian intends to challenge Lu Shidi. In midair, Lu Shidi gazed at Yi Xian. He was slightly surprised because he hadn't expected that Yi Xian would challenge him. In all fairness, Yi Xian was absolutely not a match for him. Regardless of whether it was combat experience or cultivation, Yi Xian was absolutely not a match for him. However, Yi Xian had done it. There's something fishy going on. Lu Shidi shook his head and smiled. All right. He knew that there was something fishy going on, but he still accepted the challenge. It was a problem of morale. If he didn't fight, then it would severely affect their morale. Moreover, why would he have to fear Yi Xian? In midair, Lu Shidi walked slowly towards Yi Xian, and he grinned. Yi Xian, I'm very curious about exactly how. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly vanished. In the blink of an eye, a blood-red prisoner character suddenly appeared above Lu Shidi, and then a strand of formidable energy instantly enveloped Lu Shidi. At the same time, a ray of light suddenly arrived in front of Lu Shidi, and another formidable energy enveloped Lu Shidi as soon as it arrived. The sword domain. At the instant that the sword domain appeared, Lu Shidi's expression finally changed. At this moment, he sensed the aura of death. Right at this moment, Lin Xiaoshu suddenly attacked. He tossed out an ancient book and smashed it against the blood-red prisoner character. Bang! The prisoner character trembled violently, and it was at this moment that Lu Shidi was blasted 300 m away. However, he'd lost his right hand. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned. Meanwhile, Yi Xian glanced at Lin Xiaoshu and Lu Shidi, and then he spat. Tui! Shameless! Everyone was speechless. P.S. Have any readers gone on a blind date? What should I pay attention to when going on a blind date? Besides that, what should I tell them if they ask about my income? Should I tell them the truth or exaggerate a little? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.